Corpse 2 left. Ling Han didn't stop him. Corpse 2's physique was comparable to 10th tier rare metal, and he would need to strike it for a long time to split it open. But Corpse 2 wasn't a dead person. So would Corpse 2 let him attack as he pleased? He felt a sense of urgency arise. He'd assumed that with Purple Moon Empire's impact, the 5 great sects and the 1,000 Corpse sect would be restrained in the middle state, and wouldn't care about small places like the east, south, west, and north regions, yet the 1,000 Corpse sect unexpectedly assaulted here first. Fortunately, they'd only sent a heaven-tier elite. The unification had to be faster so that the world would be a king's territory. Then wherever he fought would be his home turf, and he would be able to receive the blessing of the power of the nation. Moreover, the larger the territory and the more numerous the citizens, the stronger the blessing he would receive. Besides, Ling Han had to hurry up and grasp Ice Dragon Ground Blast Formation, a 10th tier formation, which would bring him the battle prowess which he most urgently needed at the moment. A trip to Blood Flame Valley and killing a few stubborn ones who wouldn't heed the persuasion. Ling Han also became merciless and definitely wouldn't care about the discontentment of a few people for the great cause of splitting open the skies. Were the lives of the people in the world more important, or was satisfying a few people's desire for power more important? As the Winter Moon sect and other large sects surrendered one after another, North Region's unification also became smooth and orderly. Wherever the great army passed, white flags were raised. Heaven-grade alchemist and heaven-tier battle prowess. The two added together were invincible. Ling Han embarked on a return trip. After a slight rest and reorganization, he marched westward to take down the West region first. Then he'd seize the South region, and at last take down the East region to complete the unification of the periphery. The Middle States battle would have to be left to the Purple Moon Empire and Ma Duo Bao. The 8 kings were very powerful, but this generation's 5 great sects were also powerful, and the 8 kings might not be able to succeed. The Lunar King had also said that the 8 kings together weren't a match for Ma Duo Bao, who knew how powerful the damned fatty really was. Hellion Sun Shui moved the capital to North Region's Cold Wind City. The place was chosen, on one hand, because of its location, just at the center of the North Region, which made it convenient for dispatch, and on the other hand because Cold Wind City had the character Han in it. Ling Han was now walking towards Cold Wind City, and after 7 days the party returned to the Imperial City. Hellion Xianxia indeed was skilled at ruling a country. In a short while, the Imperial City already appeared imposing, and had the prestige of a king. More important were the aspirations of the people. People were discussing Great Ling Empire's new policies and praising them unceasingly. Earnestly thinking for the people would obviously respond with sincerity. People were very simple. You let me live a good life, so I'd support you. Ling Han as a sovereign, not as a heaven-grade alchemist or a high-level martial artist, finally left an impression on the minds of the ordinary people. He was glad to see such change, and purposely slowed down his pace, walking slowly along the way. Damn it! You dare to contest over a girl with this young master. Do you know who this young master is? When they passed by a place, they suddenly heard a voice filled with arrogance. Why does it sound familiar? Ling Han stopped in his tracks. From the voice and the tone, he knew that it was a fop. But why did it sound so familiar? Could he be acquainted with such trash? Zhu Xian'er's delicate face blushed as she said, "It's my younger brother." "Oh right, Zhulong Xian." Ling Han couldn't help but reveal a smile and said, "Then let's go in and have a look." He was Zhu Xian'er's relative, and since they encountered him, they might as well have a look. He looked up shortly and shook his head. Spring Full Pavilion, a place for men to feel ecstasy. "Masters?" A souteneur greeted them and was about to express his warm welcome. But then he saw Ling Han's party, which was too damned unnatural. A grown man, then a celestial beauty, a beautifully decked little girl, and a rabbit. What assembly was this? Gold-seeking Rat scuttled over and scratched the souteneur's face. "Why'd you ignore this baby? Why'd you ignore this baby?" Ling Han snatched back Gold-seeking Rat, threw over a gold bar, pointed at the second floor and said, "What's going on there?" The souteneur was still panic-stricken. Such a large rat, although it was chubby and made him instantly think of hot pot. Its claws were too fierce, tearing open his skin, but receiving Ling Han's tip, He instantly turned his anger to joy and said, "My lord, those are two customers quarreling due to jealousy." It was simple. Two young masters took a fancy to a hostess and wanted to have her first time. This was problematic. The first time was one and only. Consequently, the two young masters got into a quarrel, first competing who had more money, and now it rose into the competition of family backgrounds. The typical style of rich and good-for-nothing young men. "You look quite fine. Could you be a catamite?" The other spoiled young man said smilingly. "This young lord is Zhu Long Xian. Do you know what those 3 words represent?" Zhu Long Xian hooted. "My sister is North Region's #1 genius, the world's most beautiful Zhu Xian'er, and my brother-in-law is even more impressive. He's Great Ling Nation's emperor, heaven-grade alchemist Ling Han. Ha 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 ha, if you say so. I can also say I'm Ling Han. Catamite, be nice, call me brother-in-law," the other spoiled young man said. Zhu Xian'er couldn't help but reveal an irritated look. The foulness was directed at her and angered her. Hunyo, however, clapped and said, "Good, good. Let's gift him the alluring woman." Pong, pong, pong. They started fighting upstairs, and Zhu Long Xian shouted, "Damn you! You're not fit to be this young master's brother-in-law. Why don't you take a piss and look in the mirror? See how this young master will bloody your face. Like I'm afraid of you." The two began fighting upstairs and the pavilion was instantly in turmoil, but the two of them had great backgrounds, so the other people didn't dare to stop them, and could only run out one after another. Zhu Long Xian and the other youngster already fought their way out onto the main street, kicking and punching each other. They weren't experts and their fight was like that of local hoodlums. Their faces and bodies were full of bruises and injuries. With the disturbance on the main street, the guards obviously came quickly and took down both of them. "Impudence! How dare you seize me? Do you know who I am?" The other spoiled young man was also just as arrogant after being seized, having no fear, but rather extreme arrogance. "I'm Qian Feng, and my brother is Qian Wuyong." "Qian Wuyong, do you guys know him?" "He's His Majesty's good brother, a right-hand man," the youngster shouted. "He was Qian family's clansman?" Ling Han frowned. The old friends in the Huyang Academy all joined the army and assumed significant posts. Although their cultivation wasn't high, they had Ling Han's trust. After all, there wasn't that much time to develop the backbone in the army. However, what came with it were such problems. People from large families were obviously lofty, and it was hard to lose the habits that were maintained for a long time. Contrarily, coming from the desolate north, these large families instead inflated in their pride and were less and less reverent. It was time to put them in order. With Qian Feng's shout, those soldiers all seemed to become hesitant. He was someone with a great background, so was it really good to seize him? If they seized him now, wouldn't he just be released later? Qian Wuyong, His Majesty's old friend and the Empire's outstanding minister. Could his brother be touched? To hell with Qian Wuyong. Zhu Long Xian was even more arrogant. "My sister is Zhu Xian'er, the future queen of Great Ling Empire. Seize this guy for this young master and lock him in the imperial prison for a few months." Hunyo was instantly infuriated. She was Ling Han's queen. Ling Han didn't bat an eyelid. He quite wanted to see how these soldiers would handle it, a microcosm of Great Ling Empire. "Two young masters, don't cause a disturbance here. It's bad influence. Follow us to the Imperial Guard headquarters. We still need to go through the motions, after all," an officer said, sounding very courteous. Although the two people's identities weren't verified, it was the imperial capital, and how many people dared to cause a disturbance and recklessly give themselves an identity, especially an honorable identity? Their identities would definitely be checked and verified, and things obviously wouldn't end well for impersonators. Thus, the officer was very careful. Zhu Long Xian and Qian Feng, however, weren't willing to let the matter drop, and wanted the military official to seize the other person. Spoiled young men fighting over a woman's favor also had to abide by the rules. It would be the end whenever one had the upper hand, and they normally wouldn't put the other party to death. After all, if all the spoiled young men were dead, who would see their show of authority? Ling Han shook his head. The territory was expanding rapidly, but the entire country's caliber couldn't keep up. It was no wonder, as he only spoke of 2 articles, one of which was expansion, and the second was appease the citizens' hearts. He didn't say to rule the country by high standards. He stood up and said, "Seize them both, escort them to the East Gate, and flog them 100 times. Pah! Who the hell are you to talk of beating us? Do you know who my brother is?" Qian Feng shouted harshly. He was truly furious. Even these soldiers treated him with respect, so who did he think he was? Brother-in-law? Zhu Long Xian shouted in a pleasant surprise. "Your Majesty!" The soldiers all knelt down one after another. "Why, Your Majesty?" Chang Feng was struck dumb. This was Great Ling Empire's sovereign and the mightiest figure of North Region nowadays, and he actually dared to snap at the other party. Beyond everything, Rain Country's families were nothing after coming out of the fallen Moon Gorge, and their glory now was all thanks to Ling Han. He sure plucked up some courage. Ling Han waved his hand and said, "Drag them away for a flogging." "Yes, Your Majesty." Those soldiers instantly became as fierce as tigers and wolves, for it was the reigning emperor's decree. Brother-in-law, why beat me too? Sister. Zhu Long Xian saw Zhu Xian'er and shouted in a hurry, obviously hoping his sister could appeal for mercy in his stead. However, Zhu Xian'er only shook her head at him and didn't speak at all. Well, the 2 spoiled young men were both dragged away. How unfortunate for them to have bumped into the muzzle. However, if it weren't for the chance encounter here, he really wouldn't have known that Zhu Long Xian already came here. It was quite funny thinking about it. Zhu Long Xian really had foresight when he called him brother-in-law. Returning to the imperial palace, Ling Han immediately set about the problem of strengthening the law and jurisdiction. In reality, authority inevitably came with privileges, or why else would people revere authority? Ling Han didn't think to make every family clear like water. Instead, there had to be a bottom line that mustn't be broken. Fighting and quarreling over a woman were small things which he didn't need to be so strict about, but coercing women into prostitution, dominating someone's wife, and seizing property, such dirty dealings definitely needed to be eradicated. Punishing Zhu Long Xian and Qian Feng in public today, he made them an example to others. Just as he had conceived the thought, these 2 guys bumped right into him. Although the 2 of them were each whipped 100 times, Qian family's head entered the imperial palace and requested to meet at night, kneeling in penitence before Ling Han and pleading in a tearful voice as if an enormous sin had been committed. Ling Han's tone was slightly stern, and he warned him to properly control the people of his family, drawing a bottom line for him. If this bottom line was crossed, he wouldn't care about friendship, and whoever needed to be killed would be killed. The head of the Qian family obeyed in fear. He was only in the spiritual pedestal tier, terrified just standing in front of Ling Han, so why would he dare to infuriate Ling Han? Besides, Qian family was currently 100 times more imposing than back in the Rain Country, so why would he wish to be struck back into the original condition? The second day, Zhu Long Xian covered his butt and also went to see Ling Han. Earlier, since Zhu Xian'er left the imperial city with Ling Han, not many people believed him, although he kept saying he was Zhu Xian'er's younger brother. Of course, not many people did anything to him, for what if it were true? Thus, his days passed by neither good nor bad. Now that his brother-in-law finally returned, he was obviously going to be pettishly charming, and at best the title of some sort of king would be conferred to him. Then, he'd be awe-inspiring and beat anyone who was an eyesore. "Brother-in-law, I missed you so much," he shouted right when they met and dove in front of Ling Han, tightly hugging his legs. Ling Han, Uncle Rabbit didn't know you had such a grown son," Uncle Rabbit teased. "Be brother-in-law, are my eyes blurred? Or is a rabbit talking?" Zhu Long Xian instantly forgot to fawn over Ling Han and stared blankly at the rabbit with surprise all over his face. What's so amazing about Uncle Rabbit talking? Back in the day, Uncle Rabbit was unmatched in the world with unparalleled divine might, and who wasn't convinced? The rabbit boasted. Zhu Long Xian didn't know better, still shocked by a rabbit that could talk, and he instantly held the rabbit in extreme reverence and began to lick its boots. Why, the rabbit really liked it and was very pleased. feeling that Zhu Long Xian looked more and more pleasing to the eye. In a mere 2 months' time, the North region was completely unified and came under the jurisdiction of the Great Ling Empire. It was obviously because North region's martial arts level was too low. The strength of deity transformation tier could make a clean sweep, and with Ling Han's identity as a heaven-grade alchemist, the resistance disintegrated after the Half-Moon sect and the other 5 great forces surrendered. In the following 3 regions, the West region's martial arts level was the lowest, but there were also deity transformation tier elites keeping watch. East region and North region both had heaven tier elites and wouldn't be easy to seize. After North region was unified, Ling Han wasn't in a rush to march westward, and instead began to manage the army, picking out martial artists above the spiritual ocean tier to develop a high-end battle power with the methods of the Purple Moon Empire. After all, the other 3 regions' martial arts level was high. Relying on normal soldiers would simply be a joke, for elites could kill a whole field of them just by waving a hand, and all of Great Ling Empire's property would have to be spent on paying compensation. Ling Han didn't lack high-level mystic arts. He obviously could imitate the Purple Moon Empire, which were also the most enticing for martial artists. In the North region, spiritual ocean tier warriors could surely be called experts, and, originally, these people disdained to join the army. But now, each one of them strived to enlist as if in fear that the mystic arts would be seized by others if they fell behind. Moreover, Ling Han also had the Black Tower to provide medicinal ingredients, and was even a heaven-grade alchemist. The Alchemist Society also served him, and adding medicinal pills as part of the rewards also had a positive effect. The circumstances were gratifying. On this day, Ling Han was in the royal court, discussing with all the ministers about the expedition to the West region, when an elite barged into the palace with a disdainful look. "Who's the one that can make decisions here?" the person said loftily. He was a very strange person. His figure was extremely tall and sturdy, and his facial features were plain with veined patterns that looked to be inborn. But this wasn't the strange part. He had 2 small buns on his head, looking as if a fawn about to grow antlers. He had heaven-tier presence, and it was high-level, even a being at the peak stage. "Fourth uncle, what's there to say to these lowly humans? Let's just seize them and be done with it." A youngster also walked in the imperial palace, wearing a multicolored battle suit, looking as if a peacock showing off its feathers. Hellion Sun Shui moved closer to Ling Han and whispered, "The older one is Shenyu Chang and the smaller one is Shenyu Dongming. Don't provoke them. Just make them leave by going through the motions." Ling Han suddenly realized it was the sea race. How truly arrogant. Did they really take this place as their territory? It was no surprise thinking about it. The royal lineage of Shenyu alone had nearly 30 shattering void tier elites, and what sort of accumulation was this? How terrifying was their strength? In the eyes of the sea race, this was a remote and desolate place. But Shenyu Dongming? Ling Han looked towards the peacock man. He was Hellion Xuanshua's fiancé? He'd heard Hellion Xianxia say that the Hellion and Shenyu family were in the process of discussing an alliance to resist against the Wunren royal family together. Among the North Sea's 3 royal families, Wunren was the strongest, strong to the point of being able to annihilate either of the 2 other families with its own power. Thus, the 2 families could only resist it by establishing alliance. But how could it be guaranteed that everyone was with one heart and mind and wouldn't stab each other in the back? Union by marriage. Hellion Sun Shui was the most outstanding girl in the younger generation of the Hellion family, and Shenyu Dongming was the most outstanding male in the Shenyu family, though slightly inferior to Hellion Xuanxua, but not by much. Hellion Xuanxua was too outstanding. However, when Hellion Sun Shui discovered about settling accounts, she had the plan of obtaining the Vial of Curses, and could only conduct it in secret or else, once she was charged with murdering a royal family member, even the imperial family would be furious. She'd never expected to be struck by a giant silver spider and lose all her memories. From then on to follow Ling Han and recover her memory after having sex once. She returned to the North Sea, but discovered that she was pregnant, and then no longer had the intention of marrying Shenyu Dongming, and hid to give birth to the child. However, the fire couldn't be stopped, the news leaked, so she obviously could only run away with her son. Now, the sea race had finally found her. Ling Han withdrew his gaze, got up from the throne, walked over in large strides and said, "I can make decisions. What is your business here? He wasn't afraid that the two people from the Xianyu family would recognize Helian Sunshui, because Helian Sunshui not only changed her appearance with the disguise pill, but also cultivated his ancient art, which could change her aura. Now, she was only a flower blossom tier warrior, and wouldn't be associated with the North Sea's pearl. Xianyu Cheng's gaze swept by, overflowing with terrifying coercive might that could make the skin of even deity transformation tier elites break. He purposefully put on a show of strength for Ling Han, but to his disappointment and surprise, Ling Han seemed perfectly fine and wasn't the least bit affected. This human was somewhat strange, but that was all there was. Xianyu family's roots were very deep, and even against the 5 large ancient sects, they could keep their backs straight and even berate them from a commanding position, so what of a mere deity transformation tier junior? He spoke. This lord wants you to find someone. Oh, whom? Ling Han said indifferently, although he already knew it was Helian Sunshui. Xianyu Cheng raised his hand and threw out a scroll painting, and said, pour all the power into finding the girl on the painting for this lord. Find her, and this lord will have rewards for you. But if not, you guys can prepare for your own funeral. Fourth uncle, the environment here isn't bad. Xianyu Dongming sat on the throne casually. Let's wait here. Okay. Xianyu Cheng considered it slightly and nodded. Although North Region was far from being as large as the North Sea, it was too much to search for 2 people. They found nothing running this way and that, so it'd be better to wait for news here. Besides, though he was the senior one, Xianyu Dongming's status in the family was above his. The child had very pure ancestral blood, which just hadn't completely awoken. His future accomplishments were limitless, and he received key training of several shattering void tier elites in the family. So, as long as it wasn't excessive, he would let Xianyu Dongming have his way. The palace made over there. Bring over the thing you're carrying. Xianyu Dongming beckoned at the 2 palace maids that stood tall and majestically on the 2 sides. These palace maids were holding all sorts of fruits, colorful and sweet-smelling, that worked up his appetite. Those palace maids all looked towards Ling Han, while a shred of killing intent arose within Ling Han's eyes. But after seeing Helian Sunshui, he forcibly held down the killing intent and nodded, signaling the palace maids to do as told. The hundreds of ministers all felt they'd been humiliated, for here was Great Ling Empire's power center, which represented the face of Great Ling Empire. But now an outsider sat on the imperial throne and snapped at will. But what could be done? The opponent was too powerful, and even Yuan Cheng he couldn't endure that presence, so who could rival him? To provoke hostility would be only to invite their own destruction, so the choice was simple. Xianyu Dongming casually took some fruits to eat, relaxed his countenance and said, Fourth uncle, these things are really delicious. You try some too. He threw some fruits over to Xianyu Cheng. Xianyu Cheng was old and prudent, and obviously wouldn't disregard his appearance like Xianyu Dongming, but the latter had good intentions. It would be inexcusable if he didn't accept it, so he took a grape and put it into his mouth. Instantly, he also revealed an astonished expression. Too fresh and too delicious. Moreover, within the grapes was a shred of spirit power, which could be directly absorbed, and though it was pitifully little, it was definitely something good for low-level martial artists. If Xianyu family could plant these grapes in large amounts, then in 20 to 30 years, their family's strength as a whole could definitely increase by a level. Xianyu Dongming was more and more unbridled as he stared at a few palace maids and couldn't help but reveal a lecherous smile. He said, I didn't expect human girls to look good too. Hey, that one in charge in the future, prepare a large box of these fruits for me, and these palace maids just 10. Although the human race is lowly, playing's no harm. 10's enough, can't manage more than 10 anyway. Ling Han revealed a smile, but it was threateningly cold. You enter my territory, take my position, and want me to gift you women and money? What, you're not convinced? Xianyu Dongming sneered. What a joke. He was a dignified genius of the Xianyu family, and his willing to sit here was already thinking highly of Ling Han, or else, with the dirtiness and inferiority of the human race, he would avoid coming here. I plan on living here for a month. In a month's time, you'll find me the girl on the scroll painting, and if you find her, I'll leave, but don't forget the fruits and palace maids every month. If you can't find her, you can go die, he said. The smile on Ling Han's face was brighter and brighter as he said, I've tolerated you all this time, but you had to seek your own death. Then, I'll have to kill you. The imperial prestige can't be challenged. Keep that in mind in the next life. Xianyu Cheng only felt it funny that a human ant in the deity transformation tier spoke threats in front of him. Truly an enormous joke. To be honest, Xianyu Dongming had indeed gone too far. But so what? Should he give face to a mere lowly human? It was just like you picking out a chicken for slaughter. Would you need to look at the expressions of the other chickens inside the chicken pen? Doing as he pleased, without scruples. It seemed this human still didn't know the power of his, and even began to make a show of authority. Human, are you tired of living? He spread his own aura, which seethed inside the imperial palace like boiling water, making everyone groan and find it difficult to bear as their body and spirit were about to break into pieces. Here, there wasn't a lack of kings among martial artists who could withstand an elite's pressure. But now it was different. Xianyu Cheng deliberately did so with origin power attached to the aura. It was no longer the problem of aura, but that of real oppressive power. Who could withstand it? Ling Han, however, was unafraid and said coldly, I respect you guys as guests, but you guys instead reverse the roles and direct me to do this and that as you please. Not just that, you even threaten me and threaten my courtiers. Do you guys know who I am? I am Great Ling Empire's emperor, and the imperial prestige and authority can't be challenged. Today, I'll take you guys as sacrifices for divine blessing, then march westward, he said loudly, stirring the officials of all ranks who fell all over the ground. This is our emperor. Long live the emperor. All the officials barely opened their mouths and bowed. Long live the emperor. The soldiers in the distant heard and also followed suit, bowing down. This was like a ripple that spread throughout the imperial city. Even the common people knelt down, shouting loudly, Long live the emperor. The decisions Ling Han made these days benefited the country and the people, winning the hearts of and minds of the people. And now the people reciprocated with their hearts. Passionate cries spread throughout the entire imperial city as the people's minds aligned. The power of the nation was available to use, and Ling Han's body immediately glowed with golden light. It was a voluntary blessing of the power of the nation. Xianyu Cheng couldn't help but sneer, and said threateningly, How dare you defy the heavenly law, establishing a nation and aggregating fortune? Being an emperor was the dream of many people, which wasn't strange, but establishing a country and then aggregating the power of the nation. This was something that many great forces definitely couldn't allow. In reality, many large forces didn't know why it wasn't allowed. It was the rule passed down from their distant ancestors generation after generation. Death to violators. It had to be said that the 5 ancient sects' brainwashing was quite successful, and so was the sea races. Fourth uncle, cut the crap with him, just kill him. How about I be the emperor for a few days as entertainment? Xianyu Dongming said while eating fruits, spitting the peels and pits randomly. Xianyu Cheng thought about it, but said, I'll spare his life for the time being. Finding that bitch is more important. Speaking of that bitch, Xianyu Dongming was instantly worked up, his eyes even turning red. He was Xianyu family's genius, spoiled from the moment of his birth, getting whatever he wanted. However, Helian Sun Shui made him a cuckold, which was an equivalent of giving him a loud and clear slap, making him the joke of the North Sea all of a sudden. Even the royal families of the other sea regions heard of it. If Helian Sun Shui wasn't executed in public, would he still have the face to see other people in the future? Helian Sun Shui hinted at Ling Han with her eyes, meaning to have him endure silently for a little longer. The North region's royal family was too powerful, possessing over 30 shattering void-tier elites, and not to mention dispatching them all. Even if one came, how would Great Ling Empire resist? With their lives. Ling Han, however, laughed loudly and said, To some people one can't yield. The more you're bearing it silently, the more they think that we're easy to bully. These 2 people today, I'm definitely killing them. He charged towards Xianyu Dongming. What a joke! Trying to commit murder in front of me? Xianyu Cheng sneered. He was a high-level heaven-tier elite, an almost invincible being beneath the shattering void tier. He immediately crossed Ling Han's path to block him. However, at this moment, a flash of lightning flickered by Ling Han's body, and with a Z, his figure suddenly accelerated and instantly disappeared before Xianyu Cheng. So fast. Xianyu Cheng cried out inwardly, how could he be so fast? Was this guy really in the deity transformation tier? Shit. He immediately said inwardly, turning abruptly, and his expression instantly changed drastically. As expected, Xianyu Dongming fell into Ling Han's hands. It was too shocking. Xianyu Dongming was at peak stage of the deity transformation tier, higher in tier than Ling Han, so how was he restrained with one move? This human was too out of the ordinary. Bastard! Let go of me! Xianyu Dongming shouted as he struggled. Earlier, he hadn't been on guard at all. First, he'd never thought that Ling's strength would be so impressive, and second, he'd never expected that Ling Han could charge over with Xianyu Cheng blocking his way. In a hurry, he only had time to raise his hand, and ended up being restrained by Ling Han. However, he wasn't afraid, for he was Xianyu family's genius, the jewel on the imperial crown. Did a mere lowly human dare hurt him? Wasn't he afraid of the sea race's elites being dispatched, trampling over this small imperial court? He was furious, and once he regained freedom, he would definitely step on Ling Han's head fiercely and make Ling Han suffer his fill of humiliation. Then he'd cut off Ling Han's head to use as a wine bowl in the future. Let him go now, Xianyu Cheng also shouted. He was afraid that Ling Han would do something crazy under a violent rage. 10,000 Ling Hans together couldn't compare to a single finger on Xianyu Dongming. There was no way to even think of mutual destruction. Ling Han sneered, and origin power burst forth within his right hand and invaded Xianyu Dongming's body. He said, "Let go of your sister. This emperor has already said, those who challenge my imperial prestige, no matter who, will all be killed." Ah! Xianyu Dongming screamed, for he discovered his own martial intent being obliterated. Ling Han was simply going to cripple him. However, it was too terrifying. Ling Han's cultivation was clearly inferior to his, so why could Ling Han obliterate his martial intent? It was the crushing suppression of someone one tier higher. Die! Xianyu Cheng's eyes were red. If he let Ling Han cripple Xianyu Dongming, he'd also be punished when he returned to the family, and would be better off dead. He had to intervene, for Xianyu Dongming was Xianyu family's most outstanding descendant. Ling Han shook his right hand, and ka, the bones in Xianyu Dongming's entire body crackled, all being shattered into pieces. Xianyu Dongming became a disabled person. He offhandedly threw Xianyu Dongming to the side and greeted Xianyu Cheng. Damn it! Damn it! Xianyu Cheng's killing intent seethed. Although Xianyu Dongming hadn't died, his entire body was soft like dough, all the bones apparently broken, and the martial intent on his body nearly disappeared. It would be a great injury even if cured with spirit medicine, and he'd even lose all potential and die as a mediocre person. He couldn't shirk the responsibility, and thinking about the punishment he might suffer, he was obviously driven mad. Kill this human. Kill, kill, kill. Ling Han and Xianyu Cheng exchanged blows head-on. Pang, the imperial palace, was immediately blown up, but Ling Han also brought Xianyu Cheng into the sky. The opponent could attack without scruples here, but Ling Han couldn't. His physique was too tough, and risking being struck head on a few times, he still remained unmoved. Damned human! Not only will I have you die today, the entire empire will be buried with you, Xianyu Cheng said balefully. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, the ones to die here today will only be the two of you. Bullshit. Xianyu Cheng spread his arms and snatched at Ling Han, but his expression turned stern. This human was surprisingly fast, and his physique was formidable. He really wasn't easy to deal with. Fighting in the sky, Ling Han obviously had no more misgivings and furiously attacked his opponent. Pang, 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 the two battled fiercely. They fought in close-quarters combat, each punch to the flesh, completely unlike supreme elites, and instead were like local ruffians, throwing punches and kicks completely without order. However, after fighting like this for a while, They both retreated without prior agreement. There would be no end fighting like this. Ling Han's physique reached the level of 9th tier rare metal, and Xinyu Cheng wasn't weak, either, being able to take Ling Han's blows head-on without damage to his body. Ancient true dragons naturally had formidable physiques. Although Xinyu Cheng had pathetically little ancestral blood, as long as there was a shred of true dragon's blood circulating inside his body, it was enough to increase his physique to a shocking level, equivalent to rare gold of his tier. At least, he would be a first-rate physical cultivator before ancestral blood reached its extreme. This was the C-race royal family's advantage, being a cut above others inherently. No wonder the C-race would be so proud. It was a racial strength. Ling Han touched his hands and golden light instantly flowed everywhere. He'd activated the Earth Overturning Seal and the Eye of Truth at the same time. He didn't believe that every part of the opponent's body was cultivated to a flawless degree. There had to be a weak part. Xinyu Cheng also shook both hands, and, strangely, his hands turned into dragon claws, flickering with cyan luster. Dragon claws. His bloodline was limited, and could only transform 2 hands into dragon form, which could only be maintained for a certain amount of time. But dragon claws were definitely the world's most powerful weapon. Breaking metal and shattering jade would be nothing difficult. Both parties increased their battle prowess, and after standing off shortly, they charged towards each other. Hong! 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 The Earth Overturning Seal clashed firmly against the dragon claws, and with each impact, golden and cyan-colored brilliance would explode in the sky, clearly visible to the entire imperial city. Ha 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 ha! Human, your physique is indeed formidable and your battle prowess is strong too, but your greatest weakness is your tier. You're only in the deity transformation tier after all. Xinyu Cheng sneered. Dragon claws were enough to resist the Earth Overturning Seal, even having a slight edge, and his power completely crushed Ling Han's. Is that so? Ling Han took a deep breath and operated the power of the nation, and, blessed with fortune, his power instantly skyrocketed. Arts and skills, power of the nation, medicinal pills, and so on could increase battle prowess. Battle prowess could come down to many factors, similar to how one person would definitely have different battle prowess if he were to fight with a wooden sword or a metal sword. The power of the nation's increase was power. Now, Great Ling Empire already unified the North region, enough to increase Ling Han's battle prowess by 5 stars, and in reality, it was the boost of fortune that forcibly increased his power by 5 stars. Could be considered the same as Black Tower's power boost, just not that powerful. With the power increase of 5 stars, Ling Han still couldn't rival high-level heaven tier, but wasn't far from it. He used the Demon Fairy Step, and with the addition of the Thunderclap 9th Heaven, his figure wavered like a ghost as he searched for and struck wildly Xinyu Cheng's weak points. Xinyu Cheng only possessed true dragon's bloodline and wasn't a true dragon. Besides, true dragons definitely had weaknesses too. He was struck violently by Ling Han and instantly began to scream. Ling Han found his weaknesses and beat him painfully, and blood burst from all over his body. You've infuriated me, Xinyu Cheng glowered. He was from the royal family in the North Sea and a true dragon's descendant. How honorable and respected was he? But now, he was actually beaten viciously by an insignificant human, which he couldn't accept. He roared loudly and knelt halfway down as the muscles all over his body pulsed and the 2 small buns on top of his head flickered with faint light. Ling Han sneered and said, "Are you constipated?" Xinyu Cheng ignored his scathing remark and held his breath. Wang, a true dragon's shadow formed behind his back, over 3,000 meters long, coiling upright. It was an azure dragon, vivid and lifelike, and even the dragon's beard could be seen moving under the airflow. Ling Han didn't dare to be careless, and directly unleashed the Revere Life Sword. Lord Ancestral Dragon, please assist me in annihilating this human. Xinyu Cheng roared furiously, and charged towards Ling Han while the true dragon's shadow in the sky also moved and threw itself at Ling Han. There was a shred of the might of the shattering void tier. Should he use Black Tower's power boost? Ling Han immediately shook his head. It would truly be a waste to use Black Tower's power boost on a high-level heaven-tier elite. If Xianxia were to know his thoughts, he'd definitely be infuriated. High-level heaven-tier elite? How many were there in the world? It was just a shred of shattering void-tier power. He'd receive it head-on. He struck out with his sword, executing the 10,000 techniques return to one with his right hand while unleashing the earth-overturning seal with his left hand and simultaneously activating the demonic pattern, attaching a shred of the power of laws onto it. Reckless, Xianxia sneered. He'd summoned ancestral blood, which could only be used by royalty after reaching the heaven tier. Due to the different intensity of ancestral blood, the true dragon's shadow's power would be different. The strongest could even reach the 9th layer of the shattering void tier. Unfortunately, with the realm's suppression, it was impossible to break through to the divine level. But no matter what, it was the sea race's grand move, kick-ass to the extreme. Shattering void tier, the world's strongest. Hong. Ling Han exchanged blows with Xianxia, and a terrifyingly strong qi fluctuated as dazzling light burst forth, exploding in the sky like a small sun, which temporarily blinded the people below. Except for a field of brightness, nothing else could be seen. The brilliance passed. Ling Han was sent flying at least 3,000 meters away with blood all over his body, with his arms bent at a strange angle and his chest was caved in. Apparently, the bones in his arms and ribs were all broken. The true dragon's shadow was formidable as expected, heavily injuring Ling Han in one blow. He had a physique of 9th-tier rare metal. Ha ha ha! You overestimate yourself. Xianxia charged over. He was going to behead this terrifying human. Yet, it isn't much, Ling Han said indifferently, and opened up his arms as his injuries recovered at a visible speed. His chest also began to rise up. The broken bones almost instantly healed. Diamond body. It was indestructible Heaven's Scroll's mystic art. Strengthening the physique was only one side of it, and it also had supreme recovery power, which was the most terrifying part. You injured me heavily 10,000 times, and I recovered 10,000 times. How about it? What? Xianxia immediately stuttered. Was this human a monster, immediately recovering from such a heavy attack? Are you really a human? You sure you're not from the Silver Moon race, famous for powerful recovery? No, even the Silver Moon race's recovery abilities shouldn't be so kick-ass. Ling Han raised his sword and said, "The battle's just begun." Xianxia calmed down and said, "To instantly recover from such heavy injuries, you definitely paid an extremely great price, and definitely can't use it many times." He launched an attack again, trying to break Ling Han's limit. Xianxia assumed that such terrifying recovery power definitely needed an enormous price to pay, or else it would be too unreasonable. But even with Ling Han's intelligence and wisdom, he'd still spent 10,000 years to comprehend indestructible Heaven Scroll's first layer and attain the diamond body. If it didn't have freakish recovery power, how could it be worth of requiring such a long comprehension time? How could it be worthy of Black Tower's level? He'd have no face to go see others. I said that I'll kill you both today, so I definitely will. Ling Han deployed the earth-overturning seal and the 10,000 techniques returned to one, finding weak points with the Eye of Truth and adding power with the Thunderclap 9th Heaven. He already used 3 mystical powers, and though the 10,000 techniques returned to one wasn't one, its power was definitely no inferior to a mystical power before the divine level. A 3-meter-long sword ray swept out, slashing towards Xianxia. Die! 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 Xianxia came crashing down with the true dragon's shadow. Pong! With another great impact, Ling Han was sent flying again, still 3,000 meters away and with shattered bones in multiple areas. However, he revealed a smile and said, "As expected, although you summoned the true dragon's shadow, it's not a real true dragon, after all, with only a shred of martial intent, or else it wouldn't be so easy for me to recover. Besides, turning my body into lightning can dampen part of the impact. Theoretically speaking, after turning into lightning, all physical attacks could be ignored because he would be lightning that couldn't be harmed by physical force. However, it would be different if martial intent was attached to the attack, and kings that form qi would have the qualifications to harm the body of lightning. Thus, even if the true dragon's shadow only had a shred of martial intent, It could still pose a threat to Ling Han's body of lightning, but in addition to the defense of the diamond body, it wasn't enough to kill Ling Han instantly. Being unable to kill him instantly meant that diamond body's recovery ability could come into effect. Ling Han smiled and said, "This is your ultimate move? Nothing impressive." Xinyu Cheng's face twitched, and he intended to retort, but didn't know what to say. True Dragon's shadow possessed a shred of the shattering void tier's might, and 10,000 Ling Hans should be swept away by it theoretically. But now, although Ling Han was heavily injured after taking each blow, his damned recovery was too fast. It wasn't that the True Dragon's shadow wasn't impressive. It was the recovery power that was too freakish. "I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe that you can keep recovering." Xinyu Cheng let out a battle cry just like a dragon's cry, and attacked Ling Han violently with the True Dragon's shadow. Ling Han had no intention of evading and simply attacked head-on. The opponent was only in the heaven tier, and Ling Han's attacks were enough to pose a threat to the opponent. Moreover, the fiercer his counterattacks were, the earlier the opponent's ultimate move would end. The two firmly believed that the other's ultimate move couldn't continue forever, and launched their strongest attacks one after another, trying to make the other reach the limit first. However, Xinyu Cheng really used his ultimate move, but Ling Han still had some things left up his sleeve. At least, he still had Black Tower's power boost which hadn't been used, or else the battle prowess of the shattering void tier was enough to crush the opponent. Fight, fight, fight. A state of chaos and darkness. Xinyu Cheng's expression was becoming more and more unsightly. How come Ling Han's recovery power wasn't reduced the least bit? Impossible. Even if Ling Han took a treasured medicine, the effects would definitely be worse and worse each time. Even worldly treasures had limits. What exactly was going on? Contrarily, his ancestral blood had already been completely burned and would soon dry out. At least several years of recovery would be needed for it to be used again. Ling Han saw the changes in his expression, and said with a smile, "Old man at wit's end? Bullshit. A mere human. An ant. You think I can't kill you?" Xinyu Cheng obviously wouldn't admit defeat, feigning contempt instead. He swung the dragon claws, but was already exhausted, so their power dropped drastically. Ling Han's battle prowess, however, wasn't impaired. After he attained the diamond body, his recovery power reached a maddening degree. He still had 10 drops of the indestructible true fluid unused. If Xinyu Cheng were to know it, he would probably lose all hope. Fight, fight, fight. Xinyu Cheng's battle prowess started to falter, and although Ling Han also greatly exhausted his origin power and physical power, don't forget that he was still an alchemy emperor who could casually take all sorts of medicinal pills, so his condition was definitely better than Xinyu Cheng's. Xinyu Cheng finally beat a retreat. If he kept on fighting, he really might be killed here as well. In the sky, the True Dragon's shadow behind him suddenly flickered rapidly a few times and disappeared. His ancestral blood had been completely used, and time was necessary for it to recover. "Humph, I'll let you live for now. Next time, when our family comes, it'll be your day of doom." Xinyu Cheng threw down a few words to maintain appearances and was about to take to his heels. "Fourth uncle." Xinyu Dongming, however, was greatly shocked. "You're damn just gonna leave me here?" This human was so ruthless. Would he want to eat stewed dragon meat? Ling Han sneered and said, "I've already said that you die here today. Where do you think you're going?" He shifted his steps to intercept the other party. With the blessing of the thunderclap ninth heaven, his speed was even faster than Xinyu Cheng's. Being faster by a little was enough. Xinyu Cheng discovered embarrassingly that he actually couldn't get away. His expression turned harsh. "You won't let me go? Then I'll fight you to the death." Ling Han brandished and struck with his sword. It was the Revere Life Sword, which was carved with an exceptional killing formation, and if one really were to be struck, even a 9th-tier rare metal physique would still be wounded. Xinyu Cheng didn't dare to fight desperately against the Revere Life Sword. As his fists moved, powerful winds were unleashed, which was still extremely terrifying and full of destructive power. Ling Han just trapped Xinyu Cheng, striking left and right with his sword to exhaust Xinyu Cheng's power. Xinyu Cheng was furious and shocked. In terms of battle prowess, Ling Han definitely wasn't his opponent, with at least a gap of 5 stars. However, Ling Han was superior with the extreme speed of movement and having terrifying recovery power, which made him unable to leave and unable to exhaust Ling Han. Could it be that he really would be reduced to a prisoner? Xianyu Cheng mustered up courage. He was from North Sea's royal family, and if he were to seized by humans, would he still have face to see other people in the future? Until this moment, he'd never believed that Ling Han would dare to kill him and Xianyu Dongming. North Sea's royal family was too powerful to the point where sending any single elite of the Shattering Void tier was enough to kill everything here completely. So Ling Han wouldn't dare to murder them. However, his battle prowess was getting weaker and weaker, and after 3 more days of fighting, he finally exhausted his power and was seized by Ling Han. He truly wasn't resigned to this defeat. Xianyu Cheng clenched his teeth. If it weren't for this guy's terrifying recovery power, he would have killed him several hundred times. But now he was a captive, so how could he be resigned to this defeat? Escort him to the East Gate. This emperor will kill them personally. Ling Han said loudly, his voice bright and clear, ringing throughout the entire imperial city. Long live the emperor! The subjects were all frantic as all of them personally witnessed that His Majesty's enemy turned into a true dragon. His Majesty could kill dragons, and what did this represent? Great Ling Empire was invincible. You dare! Xianyu Cheng was really scared now. This human really dared to kill him? What's there not to dare? Ling Han sneered and waved his hand, having people escort Xianyu Cheng and Xianyu Dongming to the East Gate. Ling Han, you'd better think clearly. Do you really want to kill them? Hellion Sun Shui approached him with a worried look on her face. Ling Han glanced at her and said, the sea race is at the door. Can't be avoided in the end, so what if I tolerated them this time? We'll still meet on the battlefield. If that's so, why tolerate them? Besides, they already walked all over us and acted atrociously. Hellion Sun Shui shook her head and said, but our strength is too weak after all, and a long time is needed for growth. Ling Han shook his head and said, didn't you hear them talk? If you couldn't be found in a month, they'd kill all the people in the imperial city. Then tell me, when the time comes, should I hand you over or not? What a joke, coming to my territory to tell me to give up someone. Don't they know that I'm in charge on my territory? Hellion Sun Shui was speechless, and, after pausing momentarily, said, next time, the Xianyu family will definitely send a Shattering Void tier elite over. What do we do then? Serve it cold one, Ling Han said with a smile. He truly was unafraid. With Black Tower's power boost, he could receive a chance to possess Shattering Void tier battle prowess, and if he could kill a Shattering Void tier elite, once the show of might was established, the sea race would have to think hard about attacking him. Moreover, his grasp of the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation was gradually reaching a higher stage, and when the time came, he'd really possess Shattering Void tier battle prowess. It was a world where strength was honored, and if he weren't powerful enough, people would only think that he was easy to bully. Dignity and honor were gotten from fighting, not from begging. He came to the eastern side of the city. The Xianyu uncle and nephew had already been escorted over, with chains all over their body, kneeling on the high platform. It was an execution stage where Zhulong Xian and Chen Feng suffered 100 lashes previously. Human, you're extremely daring. This will bring death upon yourself, and no one can save you. Xianyu Dongming shouted furiously. I am a clansman of the North Sea's Xianyu royal family, the lord of the royal family in the future. And if you dare touch a single hair of mine, the royal family's 30-plus Shattering Void tiers will trample over this place and burn you all into ashes. Hearing him say so, many people instantly felt fear. Over 30 Shattering Void tier elites? It was no joke. Still impenitent when death is near at hand. Ling Han walked over and slapped him such that Xianyu Dongming's mouth was slapped crooked. He ended up groaning and unable to speak. Xianyu Cheng knew better and didn't speak threatening words, and instead tried to coax Ling Han. Human, we lacked respect before, but we had no ill intentions, and simply wanted to find that woman. How's this? You let us go, we'll compensate you, and if you find that woman, we'll have a great reward for you. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, You're a fool? Or are you taking me for a fool? To actually say that you had no ill intentions now. No ill intentions? I don't have any ill intentions towards you guys. Just going to kill you. Xianyu Dongming wanted to jump in nervousness. If killing him wasn't ill intention, then what was ill intention? Pa! Ling Han slapped Xianyu Dongming on the face, making him stupefied. I didn't fucking say anything? So why'd you slap me? Ling Han said indifferently. Inside my imperial palace, speaking threats and doing as you please, such non-ill intention is really an eye-opener for me. Human, everything is our fault, but please forgive us once for the sake of North Sea's royal family. Shen Yucheng was sincere with his words. So long as he survived, then everything could start over, or else all would come to naught. Ling Han laughed loudly, patted Shen Yucheng's shoulder and said, Now you're quite courteous. But where was this attitude earlier? Unfortunately, we're destined not to get along with each other. Because the woman you're looking for is my wife. Oh shit. After being startled for a while, Xianyu Dongming came to his senses. This fucking cuckold. At this moment, he really cursed Ling Han's 18 generations of ancestors. No one could have expected that the person they were looking for was in front of them. Not only was Hellion Sun Shui here, even the cuckold was too. Time for the execution, Ling Han said coldly. Raising the Revere Life Sword high up, he said loudly, Great Ling Empire's imperial prestige cannot be challenged. And no matter who it is that comes, those who challenge my imperial prestige will all be killed. Pu, one strike for one life, bursting the Shenyu uncle and nephew's hearts. Normally, decapitation would be more impactful. But while Shenyu Dongming's head was easy to cut off, Shen Yucheng's wasn't, after all. His was a physique of 9th-tier rare metal. Even using the Revere Life Sword wasn't enough because Ling Han didn't have enough strength, and it wouldn't be a public beheading at that time, but rather a public sawing, and that would drastically reduce the deterrence power. Long live the Emperor! The entire imperial city's subjects all knelt down. Ling Han already declared his position that Great Ling Empire didn't fear any foreign enemies and all violators would be killed. Our Emperor is awe-inspiring. Our Emperor is imperious. The public execution instantly made Ling Han's image as an emperor deeply rooted into people's hearts. And when the news spread throughout the entire North region, his image as an iron-blooded emperor was obviously firmly established. Ling Han returned to the imperial palace, and just when he wanted to rest, he suddenly felt a warning premonition and shouted, Who is it? Tisk, tsk, tsk, such keen perception. This lady was slightly careless only once and already has been discovered by you for revealing a shred of presence. With a sigh, a red-haired beauty with an alluring figure walked out, swinging her ample buttocks and thin waist extremely seductively. She was Yi Shuang, the red hair was too obvious. You! Ling Han instantly showed a vigilant look. She was a shattering void-tier elite who was also extremely likely to be a high-level one, and he would hardly be a match for her even if he used Black Tower's power boost. Tisk, tsk, tsk. What's with your attitude? You don't like seeing this lady? Yi Shuang said unhappily. This lady saw that you had some trouble and especially ran over to help you. Oh, Ling Han said with a smile. Really couldn't tell that you're actually a good person. Tisk, if this lady didn't feel that you're especially strange, this lady wouldn't meddle in your business. Yi Shuang stroked her chin, pondered for a while and then said, And that little girl's also very strange. This lady must take her as a disciple. Pa! Nyo doesn't want it. Hunyo popped out of nowhere and made a face at Yi Shuang. Ling Han gestured with his hand at Hunyo and said, Oh, how do you plan on helping me? On two aspects. First, this lady can reluctantly accept to be a retired empress or something, and second, you call this the power of the nation? Really making this lady laugh her head off. Yi Shuang sneered. Ling Han laughed mischievously and said, How about bestowing you the title of an imperial maid, want it? To dare tease this lady? Are you tired of living? Yi Shuang's beautiful eyes narrowed as she emitted a dangerous aura. Ling Han raised both hands with a smile and said, What? You can't take a joke? Can't we still be friends joyfully? Yi Shuang laughed out loud, patted Ling Han's shoulder and said, "Youngster, you're quite daring. This lady actually underestimated you. Please advise, what's wrong with my power of nation?" Ling Han said with a serious look. "You should ask where it's right." Yi Shuang shook her head, looking like she looked down upon him. Ling Han accepted it with an open mind and said, "Please point it out." Yi Shuang started to create difficulties and said, "Where's the T? The present for acknowledging a master? Brat, you're not really thinking about getting things for free, right?" 1. Hee, are you for free? 2. Ling Han said with a smile. Yi Shuang glared at him and said, "Brat, you're seeking death again?" Ling Han nodded to have the palace maids deliver fragrant tea and fruits, and said, "Teacher Yi, please sit and allow your student to ask for guidance." "Yes." Yi Shuang sat upright and said, "Seeing that you're fairly sincere, this lady will kindly instruct you." She coughed lightly and went on. "In the divine realm, countries are divided into a total of 4 levels. Heaven's Court, Sovereign's Court, Emperor's Court, and King's Court, with Heaven's Court being the highest, and King's Court the lowest. Each level has strict limits decided by the size of the country's territory and the quality of elites, definitely not whatever you want to call it. Theoretically, it's impossible for a mayfly world to produce a sovereign court. It's not qualified enough." Ling Han immediately said, "Before, Fatima established Purple Moon King's Court, but now it's Purple Moon Emperor's Court 3. I didn't think that Fatty was that unreliable." Yi Shuang nodded and said, "That Fatty had been buried for so many years, and was cocky to dare claim it was an emperor's court. Fortunately, he's not in the divine realm, or it'd be bulldozed." "Then how can it be called an emperor's court?" Ling Han asked. "You don't have to think about this now. If you can really successfully split open the skies, you'll know eventually. Now, you'd just be wasting time thinking about it." Yi Shuang waved her hands and continued, "In reality, your king's court doesn't live up to its name and needs a shattering void-tier elite to keep watch over it." Ling Han shrugged and said, "It's useless to talk about this now. We'd better talk about something more practical." Yi Shuang rolled her eyes at him and said, "How can I explain it clearly without speaking more in detail? But you say don't even think about it now and then not qualified enough. I really don't get the point." Ling Han sighed. "The point is coming right up. Have some patience, all right?" Yi Shuang said, "Establishing a nation is easy, but if you want to extract the power of nation, it definitely doesn't suffice to just establish a nation. Power of nation, a nation's influence, its fortune. Where does it come from? It's your subjects' faith in this country and their dependence on the country, which then allows for the power of nation to be extracted." Ling Han knew this. The conversion of popular sentiments allowed the power of the nation to be extracted, or else the power of the nation would be empty talk. However, normal people can't possibly have seen you, and a nation is an abstract existence, so how will your subjects have faith? Yi Shuang asked. "What?" Ling Han fell into deep thought and said, "Then what should I do? You need a totem to be the nation's symbol, and through this totem, popular sentiments can aggregate while you extract the power of the totem. This is the correct way of the power of the nation," Yi Shuang said. Ling Han gave an "oh" and asked curiously, "You're quite clear about divine realm's situation. Could you be from the divine realm?" You guess." Yi Shuang wasn't willing to give a definite answer. Ling Han didn't dwell on this point and said, "Then how's the totem made?" "That's easy. You can find some arbitrary thing and place it in the ancestral shrine, then spread the portrait thereof all over the nation for people to worship. Naturally, the power of faith will be produced, and as time passes after the totem aggregates enough faith, it can also produce a spiritual will to protect this nation. In the divine realm, if a great war occurs between nations, whichever nation suffers the loss will have its totem weakened, and the winner will have theirs strengthened. This is the foundation of a nation. As a nation's symbol, the totem, how could it be arbitrary?" Ling Han began to think seriously as to what he would choose to be the totem. The first subconscious reaction would obviously be the true dragon. Dragon, the son of heaven, blessed by the heavens. However, he just killed 2 people of the sea race with true dragon's blood. So taking the true dragon as a totem seemed somewhat unjustifiable? Besides, Ling Han didn't think that true dragons were really extremely powerful. 9 Dragons Tyrant Body Art could grant the power of 9 true dragons, and annihilating Dragon Star Arrow was said to even be able to kill dragons. So true dragons apparently weren't superior and inviolable in the divine realm. Then why not use Black Tower? Black Tower's secrets couldn't be leaked, but fixing a tower-shaped totem, who would associate it with the Black Tower? After all, there were quite a few tower-shaped spirit tools, but none of them could compare to the Black Tower. Yes, it's decided. Ling Han smiled mischievously and said, in the future, how about you stay to be worshipped and give some advice in ordinary times? You can help dismiss experts if they come too. Then what benefits does this lady have? Eat the food here as you please. You think this lady is a chowhound? Shuang said sourly. Chowhounds are quite good. The more you eat, the more you grow. Hunyo said in all seriousness, looking somewhat enviously at Shuang's breasts, which heaved and could compare with the greatly alluring Zhu Xian airs. Shuang laughed heartily, walked over to hug Hunyo forcibly, and said, such a cute and playful little girl. This lady really wants to hug her all day. Damn it. Nyo doesn't want your hugs. Hunyo struggled repeatedly. Ling Han ignored them. Shuang was of unknown origin, but didn't seem to have ill intentions. So he let Hunyo play with her. He set about designing Black Tower's totem and changed it slightly. Although it still looked like a black tower, it was still considerably different from the one in his dantian. He immediately issued an imperial edict to use it as the nation's totem and symbol and transmit it to every corner of the North region. Of course, to turn it into a true totem and make it become a sort of faith obviously wasn't something to be done in a short period of time. According to Shuang's statement, after the totem formed, a corporeal form of the totem would be formed on top of the imperial palace to guard the imperial city. The larger the nation's territory, the stronger the strength of the subjects, and the more united the people's hearts were, the stronger the totem. He carefully recalled that neither the 9 nations of the desolate north nor Purple Moon Emperor's court had the existence of a totem. It seemed that similar to him, they didn't know anything, and just knew to establish a nation. Fatty Ma had to be reminded. Perhaps the reason he'd failed to split open the skies the last time was connected to totems. With Shuang's help, Ling Han was obviously a bit surer, and he also finally thoroughly grasped the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation and created 108 formations eyes in the Black Tower. 108 short swords were distributed around him as he threw them out. Because he'd personally created these formations eyes, he didn't need to control them with much effort. Each short sword automatically landed in the corresponding position, floating in the air. The formation patterns emitted a faint light, and the world's spirit chi instantly gathered, condensing into a white pillar. The temperature dropped drastically. Even more spirit chi swirled by as the white pillar changed rapidly, turning into an ice dragon. Ling Han stared at Shuang. What? Is there something on this lady's face? Shuang said. There's not, but I'm curious. Can't you just interrogate me with your abilities? Ling Han asked. Ha ha ha, were you born with wretchedness in your bones? This lady's not torturing you, and you're still not pleased. Shuang rolled her sleeves and said, then this lady had better not be polite. Hee. Ling Han waved his hand. I'm not being wretched. It's just pure curiosity if there's anything that can tie up a shattering void tier elite. Shuang cocked her head, thought for a while and said, all right, this lady is a divine being, but in this small world, this lady has to suffer the suppression of the heavenly Tao. What is meant by the heaven has eyes is that if this lady overdoes it, she'll be met with the realm's repulsion. Isn't that just right? You can return to the divine realm, Ling Han said. Shuang rolled her charming eyes and said, if this lady could return to the divine realm at will, would she not want to? But this world's been sealed off by a killing formation, and if this lady is repelled by the realm's force, she'll definitely be finished off by the killing formation. You're the divine being. You're the greatest. What's there to be afraid of? Ling Han said with a smile. Nonsense. This lady has been suppressed for 100,000 years, with all the blood essence absorbed. And if she still had the power in former years, would she still need to be afraid? Shuang said extremely furiously. Hey, hey, hey! How many years old of an old monster are you? Ling Han felt disgusted. This woman kept saying this lady. But in reality she was a monster that couldn't be any older. What's that look in your eyes? This lady is forever young. Besides, to convert it to this lady's lifespan, she's only now in the prime of youth. Shuang slapped the table, looking like she was about to eat someone. As expected, age was women's pet peeve and shouldn't be touched. Ling Han changed the topic and said, in short, your attacking me would enrage the heavenly DOA, and then you'd be repelled and end up dead. Not that exaggerated. It's mainly that this lady cherishes talent. Shuang wasn't pleased with his wording. Ling Han knew that she definitely wouldn't speak all the truth. The things that involved the crux obviously wouldn't be revealed. But, for now, she indeed wouldn't lay hands on him. He changed the subject and said, do you know Azura Demon Emperor? TSK. A lackey of the underworld. What demon emperor? He even dares to call himself an emperor? Really making this lady laugh her head off. Shuang said in disdain. She proved to be a real divine being, daring to look down on Azura Demon Emperor, who was split into 9 parts and suppressed, still living after countless millennia. He was absolutely a monster amongst monsters. Hold on. Ling Han was startled, and said, Azura Demon Emperor is from the underworld? A wisp of demonic chi born in the underworld that became a living spirit through countless years, and entered the divine realm through the divine realm and underworld's barrier, and then was utterly defeated. Originally thought to be dead, it turns out he was just sealed here. Shuang said, but she immediately let out a faint sound of surprise and said, why not kill him? Maybe Azura Demon Emperor escaped here, and the elites in the divine realm can't enter? Ling Han speculated. Shuang first nodded, but then shook her head and said, the small world rejects the outsiders, and it's hard to exit, but even harder to enter, even for people of the divine realm, not to mention Azura Demon Emperor from the underworld. This matter's definitely strange. Ling Han was astounded. From his perspective, Azura Demon Emperor was hunted in the divine realm and had to escape to the small world of the vast lands in the end. This was only to be expected, so why was it suddenly strange? How about the Thousand Corpse sect? I heard the divine realm also has this sect. Ling Han asked again. You brat. Why do you have so many questions? Aren't you annoying? Shuang's patience was apparently not so good. Come, serve up good tea, snacks and fruits. Ling Han waved his hand, and there immediately were palace maids that delivered all sorts of delicacies, which were all cultivated in the Black Tower. To mislead people, Ling Han placed many of them in the reserve and took it out from there ordinarily. You think this lady is a chowhound? Shuang protested, but soon began to eat delightfully. The things grown inside the Black Tower were indeed delicious, and even she praised them unceasingly. All right, this lady will slightly disclose some secrets for you to know. But each realm has its rules, and this lady can't speak too much, or else she might be targeted. She pointed at the sky, obviously meaning the eye of heavenly Tao. Ling Han nodded and said, you speak whatever you will, and I'll listen casually. Nothing will be held. Shuang snickered and said, the vast lands is a small world with incomplete rules and space, and just like a sealed pond, the sky you guys can see is only that large, and the world that can be reached is only that wide. It has an end. Ling Han nodded. So, shattering void tier elites were able to strike down the stars in the sky here, but if it were a true world, each star would be at least the size of the vast lands, so how could it be struck down? And the divine realm could be said as connected rivers and seas. You can enter the rivers through the lakes, and enter the seas through the lakes. It's boundless, Shuang said. It is a large world. At least from what this lady knows, no one can explore the ends of it. Ling Han was shocked. Even divine beings didn't know how large the divine realm was. How immense was that world? However, between heaven and earth, if there's a positive, there must be a negative, a yin to yang, an evil to good, Xianxia went on. There's an underworld that exists side by side with the divine realm. It can be viewed as an overlapping space, but we can neither see nor interfere with each other. But in reality, the two worlds are overlapping, so how can there be no interference at all? The underworld's qi is constantly seeping into the divine realm, affecting the living beings of the divine realm, and the two worlds also come into conflict. At the place where the conflict is most intense, the realm barrier is very, very thin, and the underworld's cultivators can enter the divine realm as they please. The Thousand Corpse sect is called Hades in the divine realm, and was created by some of the almighties that entered the divine realm from the underworld. The Thousand Corpse sect here is one of its sub-branches. Their purpose is to bring chaos to the divine realm and turn it into the second underworld. If the two worlds could fuse, their level would definitely increase by a cut. Ling Han was left speechless. He was here thinking about splitting open the skies and ascending to the divine realm, but the divine realm didn't seem to be much safer, being targeted by the underworld. Maybe it had really become a world of monsters and demons in the end. Is the divine realm inferior to the underworld? He asked. Since the two worlds were parallel, then the divine realm shouldn't be weak. Xianxia rolled her eyes and said, "The underworld covets the divine realm, that's one matter, and whether they can take it down or not, that is another matter. At least from what this lady knows, although countless campaigns took place over hundreds of millions of years in the two worlds, now the underworld is still the underworld, and the divine realm is still the divine realm. Neither side can deal with the other. Besides, you think that the divine realm doesn't want to absorb the underworld. They're both like two dogs. So how can you call either noble?" Xianxia really wasn't courteous, and simply condemned the two worlds as dogs. Ling Han, however, laughed loudly. He was also extremely daring and liked to break old rules, and felt that Xianxia matched his character somewhat. He couldn't help but look forward to it, and said, "After I arrive at the divine realm, I have to get around." Xianxia sneered, and said, "If you can really successfully split open the skies, then you'll definitely be forced by the large forces in the divine realm to resist the underworld's invasion army at the realm barrier." Ling Han frowned and said, "Even if I could, my strength would be barely in the god tier. Wouldn't I just be cannon fodder joining the great battle at the barrier wall?" "You're right." Xianxia clapped and said, "They'll exactly having you be cannon fodder. If you don't die, how would they rationally annex your nation? You have to know that the territories in the divine realm are extremely precious. Which force doesn't want to establish a nation, and which nation doesn't want to expand its territory? Once you die, they'll marry your daughter or marry off a woman to your son, and your divine nation will obviously be certain to become theirs." Ling Han couldn't help but laugh and said, "The people in the divine realm are also quite shameless. Hee hee. You think that there's a divine word in divine realm because the people are all straightforward and upright." Xianxia sneered. "It's just the arts that are cultivated and the environment that's different. Otherwise, what difference is there between the underworld and the divine realm?" Ling Han nodded. There were good people and bad people everywhere, and to differentiate them by territory would be too dogmatic. "Then I'd better plan for the great troubles after splitting open the skies," he muttered. "However, that's something that won't be an issue for a long time. The current problems should be dealt with first." Xianxia obviously wouldn't march westward with Ling Han, and Ling Han had no plans for that either. If she kept watch of the imperial city, nothing would go wrong. She was a divine being. Even with her vitality greatly damaged, she could still rival the 9th layer of the shattering void tier. He assembled the army. This time, he inevitably personally took to the field, commanding the army westward to take down another city. After carrying out a rounds of sacrificial offerings, the army set out, advancing west to the region wall. Except for Helian Sun Shui, Lu Yutong, Li Sichan, and his parents, who stayed in the imperial city, the others all set out, including Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiu. These two advanced into the flower blossom tier. One was at the 9th layer, and the other was at the 5th layer. With the aid of Ling Han's medicinal pills, Even a stupid swine could rise to the heavens, let alone they who were geniuses. The army numbered 1 million people. In terms of North Region's population, the amount wasn't much. But with the army, it was quality rather than quantity that counted. The West Region's martial arts level was higher than the North Region's. So what use would it be to bring a large amount of normal soldiers? Amongst the army of 1 million, there were 100,000 people who reached beyond the spiritual ocean tier, with 100 people as a small unit, 1,000 people as a medium unit, and 10,000 people as an array. This was the true elite that cultivated Purple Moon Emperor Court's combined attack formation, which could increase battle prowess extremely greatly. The remaining 900,000 people were much worse and barely counted as battle power, but there were many trifling matters that shouldn't be done by the elites, right? Report. When there was still 3 days' journey before the region wall, a scout brought information to report. Speak, Ling Han said indifferently. Your Majesty, the West region is already prepared, gathering soldiers by the region barrier. A rough estimate is over 100,000, each one of them elites, the scout said. Ling Han nodded. The scout's strength was limited, and he obviously couldn't distinguish between the spiritual pedestal tier, the heaven tier, and the spiritual infant tier. However, the West region united so fast and gathered at the region wall, showing a stance of being ready to fight a decisive battle. This was rather contrary to his expectations. After all, the forces of a region were too varied. Unlike his word of command that the entire region would obey, the West region's deity transformation tier forces were in the tens, and these forces alone would take several months' time reaching a consensus, in addition to certain wrangle on the problem of the number of experts each family dispatched. No one wanted to overdraw their own family's strength. For them to be combat-ready so quickly somewhat shocked Ling Han. Your Majesty, this subordinate is willing to take the vanguard, Yuan Cheng, he requested. Over so many days, he polished and solidified spiritual infant tier immensely, and broke through to the deity transformation tier more than 10 days ago, making him full of confidence. If he were to cultivate on his own, it would take at least 5 years more for him to reach the deity transformation tier, but following an alchemy emperor and taking medicine every day, it would be strange not to have such progression. Ong! The rock spirit cried out, pounding its chest loudly, also asking to fight. Compared to the others, the rock spirit's improvement was even faster because it had no bottlenecks, and didn't face the necessity of compacting its tier. Gnawing on the essence of stone inside the Black Tower each month, its tier leapt up and up. Now, it had already advanced into the heaven tier. The shattering void tier was too hard to reach, so it probably had to gnaw on rocks for 1 to 2 more years before it could advance to humanity's peak. Qian Wuyong, Hu Fengyue, and the others were also itching to have a go. In the years at the Winter Moon sect, they only advanced into the spiritual pedestal tier, but after joining the army, they improved one more step in a short amount of time and reached the flower blossom tier, obviously boosting their confidence greatly. Yu Kai seemed a lot more mature and sat quietly by the side, but his eyes also bloomed with the desire for battle. He advanced into the flower blossom tier and also had extraordinary strength. This time, they marched westward with almost all their forces, so the elites of various large sects were also mobilized with no lack of the spiritual infant tier elites. But these old guys were much more low-key. They knew very well that the West region's martial arts level was above the North region's. It was fine if the other side didn't come fight them, but now, they were the ones actually initiating the attack. If it weren't for Ling Han's command, having no choice, they'd really want to turn to their heels. Ling Han smiled as he waved his hand, and said, First let's make it to the region barrier to see how many experts exactly the West region has dispatched. 100,000 troops went ahead of the rest and arrived at the region barrier 2 days later. As expected, a field of military tents was in front, and countless people could be seen entering and exiting. Although there was no military discipline exhibited by them at all, each and every one was at least in the spiritual pedestal tier. A single soldier's strength was extremely formidable. With the arrival of such a large army, the West region obviously immediately reacted as everyone came out from their military tents and stood unorganized. Countless small groups could be clearly seen. Apparently, each small group was from one force and had no intention at all of teaming up with the others. It was very normal. While they were people from one region, It was precisely because they were from one region that there was great enmity between them. The forces outside the region couldn't possibly start a feud, and all strife was internal strife. Although they were now opposing the North region together, would the people of the West region rest assured leaving their backs to their competitors? Who would be that stupid? On the opposite side, Great Ling Empire's army defeated all the forces and scattered them across various small units, so they could only cooperate. Where would there be a chance to make your own small circle? Ling Han walked out with Zhu Xian'er, Hunyou, Rock Spirit, and the others behind him and arrived at the dividing line of the region barrier. If he opened a breach with Revere Life Sword, the battle would immediately erupt. At this moment, 5 youngsters walked out from the West region's camp, each one of them of peerless talent and with an invincible spirit. Among them were Su Xiaoran, Jia Ming, and Dong Linger. The barrier wall was invisible, and it was just like air if it wasn't touched, so Ling Han's eyesight obviously wasn't affected. Su Xiaoran, Dong Linger, Jia Ming, the 5 great sects' younger generation of geniuses who were almost qualified to rival the strongest ones of the current age. The other party had a total of 5 people standing alongside each other equally, and what did this show? Those 2 that weren't recognized by him were definitely Small Sword Emperor, Zhang Mo, and the Son of Lightning. These 2 people were easy to recognize. Small Sword Emperor carried an unadorned long sword on his back, and the Son of Lightning was bound by Cyan Lightning. And as his gaze swept by, it was like a thunderbolt, extremely terrifying. Although the Son of Lightning was more renowned, Ling Han was more interested in Small Sword Emperor, who was rumored to have formed Sword Heart. Despite being separated by the region barrier, Ling Han could still feel that intense sword intent on Small Sword Emperor, as if even the region barrier could be torn open. Ling Han suddenly came to a realization. No wonder the West region could unite so quickly. It was the 5 great sects' handiwork. Ling Han, you really are daring to the extreme, establishing a nation, Su Xiaoran said coldly. He held the absolute saber in hand. His eyes each had a saber shape, and his presence and spirit were reserved, seeming a lot more powerful. Ling Han said indifferently, "If I don't establish a nation, how could we escape from the murderous scheme of the 5 sects?" He now openly stood against the 5 great sects, and obviously had no more qualms. Crazy ravings, Dong Linger reproved. She was beautiful and striking, not inferior to Azure Phoenix Divine Empress. She wore a long dress, her skin was white like snow, and her features were as pretty as a painting. She was unmatched in beauty. Those aren't ravings. You guys clearly know in your hearts. Ling Han snorted. Jia Ming took one step forward and said, "I knew long ago that you'd definitely choose the West region pushovers, so the 5 of us kept watch here. Don't you think about advancing the slightest bit further? Might as well tell you, the East region is immediately dispatching soldiers to attack the North region to seize your home." As the West region's powerful figures listened, they couldn't help but reveal an annoyed look. They were calling them pushovers. They didn't dare to say anything because the 5 great sects were too strong, and the 5 people here represented the strongest battle power amongst the younger generation. Even they could only bow to them. Ling Han was calm and unhurried. The imperial city had Yi Shuang keeping watch, so nothing would go wrong. Moreover, as long as they didn't establish a nation, it didn't matter that East region attacked, for they could only take the territory and not rob him of the power of the nation. Wouldn't it be fine to just reclaim it in the future? He said, "Why's there only the 5 of you? Did the experts of the 5 great sects all die?" Jia Ming couldn't help but snort, and said, "With the 5 of us together, is there anyone below the shattering void tier that can't be killed?" Ling Han laughed loudly, and said, "The 5 great sects probably can't draw out shattering void tier elites. I suppose Purple Moon Emperor Court's 8 kings have all come into the world, restraining all your shattering void tier warriors." The expressions of the 5 changed. It was just like Ling Han said, Purple Moon Emperor's court was now extremely powerful, and although there were only 8 shattering void tier elites in the latter's ranks, each one was at the 9th layer of the shattering void tier and harnessed the power of laws, so one of them was easily capable of going against more than 10 opponents on similar level. Even though the 5 great sects were forced to awaken every single ancient almighty in advance, 100 shattering void tier elites still weren't enough to slow down the pace of advancement of the 8 kings. Now that Purple Moon Emperor's court's territory was becoming larger and larger and they gained more subjects. As a king's court, the more terrifying the blessing of the power of the nation they had become. It was tantamount to nourishing their strength through fighting, and now the 8 kings were truly powerful to the point of being unstoppable. Otherwise, drawing out any shattering void tier elite to suppress the so-called Great Ling Empire would be no effort at all. Humph, you can hardly fend for yourself, and you still have the leisure to be concerned about others? The Son of Lightning said. Thunder was drawn the moment he spoke, turning into a sea of dark clouds rolling in the sky intertwined with azure lightning. Ling Han unleashed the Revere Life Sword, and said, "All right, the squabble is over. Let's cross swords." He pushed open the barrier wall. "Kill!" Great Ling Empire's elite army yelled. Pang, 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 the rock spirit was the first to charge out. Hunyo rode on its shoulders, looking like she couldn't contain her excitement. Inside her heart hid a fierce tiger that thirsted for slaughter and blood, and the scene of such a great battle was most suited for her. The little girl flashed and turned into lightning, pong, 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 and the West region's army immediately suffered great casualties. Her battle prowess shockingly reached the heaven tier, which was obviously equal to being invincible in the West region, where the deity transformation tier was the apex. The little girl bathed in blood and had already become a demon, with her eyes shooting out lightning. With the sweep of a glance, a large field of elites were immediately turned into ashes. The Son of Lightning couldn't help but be greatly intrigued, and said, "I'll handle her." He also turned into lightning and charged towards Hunyo. As he glared with his eyes, 2 exceptional treasured swords rushed out and slashed towards Hunyo. Nyo's wind and fire fist. Hunyo roared, and carried out a fierce battle with the Son of Lightning. Ling Han only needed to let the spiritual infant tier elites pass through since the others wouldn't be affected by the region barrier. He held the Revere Life Sword in hand, and said, "You 4 attack together." In reality, no one could block these 4 except for him. Su Xiaoran smiled sarcastically and said, "Against you? Do the 4 of us need to join hands?" He didn't awaken the Absolute Saber because once the Absolute Saber was awoken, the sword in Ling Han's hand would definitely also wake up, and no one would be able to kill Ling Han then. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "So much self-confidence. Then I'll speak no more. Bring it on." Su Xiaoran swung his saber as he charged over. He didn't awaken the Absolute Saber, but the saber was still all-conquering. With the slash of the saber, even Ling Han's physique couldn't completely withstand it. This saber's sharpness had already surpassed the level of 10th tier spirit tools. Wang, a strange feeling shrouded Ling Han, making him feel unable to swing his sword. Saber heart. Ling Han was deeply moved inside. He and Su Xiaoran came to grips a total of 2 times. The first time was the clash of strength, but Su Xiaoran's grasp of the saber heart definitely wasn't this strong. At least, it couldn't influence him. The second time didn't count, since it was simply the clash between the Absolute Saber and the Revere Life Sword, and Saber Heart wasn't of any use at all. But this time, Su Xiaoran's grasp of the Saber Heart improved even more, and could even affect him. Ling Han adhered strictly to his heart and operated the Revere Life Sword with his left hand, slashing towards Su Xiaoran. Ding, ding, ding. The 2 of them exchanged blows, releasing ceaseless rays of light. Su Xiaoran became stronger again, not only having initial mastery of Saber Heart, but also having improved greatly in all aspects. His was definitely a high-level Heaven Tier's battle prowess. Ling Han was unafraid, executing the Desolate Hell Sword with the Revere Life Sword in the right hand while operating the Earth Overturning Seal with the left hand, spreading out golden light. This could also pose a great threat to Su Xiaoran, who, after all, wasn't a physical cultivator. However, Ling Han was still no match for him. Su Xiaoran already crossed into the Heaven Tier. This guy who could cultivate casually and view bottlenecks as non-existent was kick-ass as expected, improving surprisingly fast. He was only in the first layer of the Heaven Tier, but his battle prowess reached Heaven Tier 10 stars, crossing 9 stars of battle prowess, too terrifying. It was only a few dozen moves before Ling Han's body had many wounds, but compared to his physique's toughness and recovery ability, it was no big deal, looking like he was hurt but was not really. At this moment, Ling Han, however, felt chills all over his body, sensing a great imminent danger. Ling Han turned abruptly and saw Dong Linger holding a scroll in her hand. It was this thing that made him feel extreme chills and pins and needles. Was this a shattering Void Tear's law decree? Other than that, Ling Han couldn't think of anything that could make him feel such a strong sense of danger. The shattering Void Tear, the strongest in the world, overwhelming Heaven Tier elites not just by a tiny bit. Su Xiaoran also realized it, and said discontentedly, "Humph! I can kill him. The seniors have said that the only mission on this trip is to kill this person." Dong Linger said coldly, and didn't give Su Xiaoran face. She opened the scroll slowly, and instantly, a terrifyingly powerful presence swept by, making everyone anxious. The shattering Void Tier, beings at humanity's peak. Even a shred of their aura could cause the skies to turn pale. Inside the scroll, white divine light rose constantly, and though Dong Linger was the one who'd opened it, it was as if she was non-existent and only that scroll remained in the world, conveying the heavens' decree. It was definitely a shattering Void Tier elite's law decree. Ling Han nodded inwardly. The 5 great sects were really even willing to take out such a law decree. After all, it wasn't just the matter of a shattering Void Tier expending their cultivation to write it down. Just how precious were the materials? If it weren't a shattering Void Tier beast's skin, how could it withstand a shattering Void Tier's will? If it weren't a shattering Void Tier being's blood essence, how could it possibly leave a mark on such a beast's skin? How many shattering Void Tier beasts were there in the world? Therefore, the 5 great sects really buckled down. Su Xiaoran snorted, but said no more. His personal plans obviously couldn't override the sect's interests even if he was absolute Saber sect's most exceptional genius in 10,000 years. The one and only. Hong. When the scroll fully unfurled, white light intertwined and formed a phoenix, with wings 300 meters long, emitting an all-powerful presence. The shattering Void Tier. As Dong Linger pointed with her index and middle finger, the phoenix cried out resoundingly and fluttered its wings. Even the blue skies were about to collapse as it was diving extremely rapidly towards Ling Han. A shattering Void Tier attack. Did a deity transformation tier warrior qualify to resist it? Not to mention a deity transformation tier, even a heaven-defying Heaven Tier elite wouldn't, just like how it was impossible to rival a Flower Blossom tier opponent no matter how strong a spiritual pedestal tier elite was, it was insurmountable. But at this moment, the temperature of the air dropped rapidly as everyone felt like they were falling into an ice cave, trembling all over involuntarily, instantly losing their fighting spirit and simply wanting to hold their arms to escape the cold. With a dragon's cry, an entirely icy white true dragon appeared, waving its claws fiercely at the phoenix. Hong! The 2 divine beasts exchanged blows, the momentum shaking the skies. Theoretically, true phoenixes definitely wouldn't lose to true dragons, but true dragons were relatively stronger, so true dragons were regarded as the divine realm's standard measure of power. But the problem was that neither of 2 were true divine beasts. One was formed by a formation, while the other was formed by a law decree. Pong, in an exchange of blows, the phoenix was immediately sent flying, not enduring a single exchange. Ling Han smiled proudly. He'd already expected such a result. Where did the attacks of a law decree come from? Martial artists branded their martial intent onto talisman paper with their own blood essence, which, unfolded, could form attacks no different from spirit talismans. In this way, the power of law decrees was limited by 2 points. First, the martial artist's strength, and second, the talisman paper's quality. The talisman paper used for shattering Void Tier's law decree would definitely be shattering Void Tier's beast's skin, and if the beast was only in the 3rd layer of the shattering Void Tier, then it would be impossible to withstand martial intent even 1 layer higher. Similarly, even if the talisman paper was of the 9th layer of the shattering Void Tier, but the creator only was at the 3rd layer of the shattering Void Tier, then the law decree created would have at most power of the 3rd layer of the shattering Void Tier. A 2-way restriction decided 2-way. There were pitifully little shattering Void Tier beasts to begin with, so where could a high-level one be slaughtered so that you can get beast skin? Such a thing was a most valuable treasure that could be used to refine high-level defensive gear, and creating a law decree was really too wasteful. Besides, writing a law decree required one's own blood essence, which was a type of great expense for shattering void tier elites. Who would be willing to do it? Thus, Ling Han estimated that the law decree's power wouldn't surpass shattering void tier 5 stars. And as he'd expected, the Phoenix's attack was knocked back by the Ice Dragon. It probably only had shattering void tier 2 to 3 stars of battle prowess. What? Su Xiaoran and other four all cried out in surprise. That was a shattering void tier elite's personally refined law decree. How could it be not even withstand one blow? That Ice Dragon? They were all shocked. With their judgment, they could obviously see that it was a formation. And the biggest difference between formations and law decrees was that law decrees would naturally become a piece of wastepaper as the shattering void tier's blood essence was all burned out after one use. But formations were different. As long as heaven and earth was still present, the formation could absorb spirit chi continuously, its power not decreasing. If the law decree was powerful enough, then it could destroy the formation in one vigorous effort, and it would be useless to have strength that didn't run out. But the key was that the formation now was the stronger one. What else could be done, then? Su Xiaoran brandished the absolute saber, and said, Ling Han, no one used their trump card of shattering void tier? I'll fight with you. Ling Han shook his head, and said, Sorry, it's a war now. Not the time to contest with personal strength. He spurred the Ice Dragon ground blast formation towards the four great geniuses. Damn it! Su Xiaoran yelled angrily, and could only awaken the absolute saber without any other choice. A terrifying supreme presence overflowed as the absolute saber floated in the sky, illuminating the blue skies. Once the absolute saber was awoken, the Revere Life Sword also operated on its own and confronted the absolute saber. Now, with the shattering void tier battle prowess on both sides equal in number, the absolute saber and the Revere Life Sword were old opponents, hard to tell which was the better. But the Ice Dragon was definitely stronger than the Phoenix, and law decrees existed limited in time. Once exhausted, the West Region's coalition army would undoubtedly be killed. Su Xiaoran and the other great geniuses' expressions changed. Who could have expected that Ling Han would possess battle prowess of the shattering void tier in such a short amount of time? Retreat, it was a mistaken evaluation. Shattering void tier elites must personally take charge. Yes, at least those possessing battle prowess of shattering void tier 5 stars. The four great geniuses immediately gave up the fight, and retreated swiftly with the absolute saber and the shattering void tier law decree as protection. Ling Han chased for a while and gave up. The focus now was to take the West region. As for the old scores with Su Xiaoran and the others, that could be settled in the future. As long as he advanced into the heaven tier, which one of them could rival him? When he advanced into the shattering void tier, he would also be invincible. When he returned, he saw that the Son of Lightning had already run. Punyo didn't lose out and showed her terrifying strength of the greatest genius in the world. In the battle, the West region's coalition army was completely defeated and dispersed, with several deity transformation tier elites being killed and high-end battle power being weakened greatly. The Rock Spirit remained to assist the army on its continuous expedition, while Ling Han, Hunyo, Zhu Xian and the others returned to the North region. The East region invaded, though it could be guaranteed that the Imperial City wouldn't be lost. Other cities falling into the enemy's hands would affect the nation's fortune after all. They set out on the path of return. On the third day, a man appeared in the middle of the road with a table placed in front of him. He sat on an imperial tutor's chair and was sipping tea, looking to be completely at ease. In such desolate wilderness, a tea-drinking man unexpectedly appeared, completely relaxed. It was abnormal no matter how one looked at it. Ling Han and the others stopped in their tracks and looked towards that person. He was a man gentle like jade, looked to be in the 30s, filled with a manly charm, and with a full head of black hair that draped over his shoulders, seeming somewhat wanton and unrestrained. This person obviously also saw Ling Han. He put down his teacup and said, "Tea is really such a good thing, cultivating one's mind and illuminating one's heart. This sir sitting in the middle of the road, are you planning to serve me tea?" Ling Han said with a smile, and walked over with large strides. The man took out a cup from the tea tray and filled it up, then said, "Why not?" Ling Han pulled out a chair and sat down face to face with that man. He lifted the cup to smell it and said, "It indeed is good tea." That man cracked a smile and said, "It's dragon's birth tea, which according to legends grew bathing in the reign of true dragons, cultivated once in 100 years. Whether it really bathed in the reign of true dragons is unknown, but the preciousness of it is not to be doubted. The tea's fragrance overflows in the mouth, lingering for a long time." "Thanks." Ling Han took a sip, and his brows relaxed involuntarily. He should also plant this kind of good tea inside the Black Tower. "Please enjoy." That man extended his hand, making an inviting gesture. Ling Han took a few sips, placed the teacup down and said, "I haven't asked what this lord's distinguished name is." That man smiled faintly and said, "I'm called Corpse Boss." "Pooh." Ling Han almost spurted out a mouthful of tea. He'd thought of many possibilities, but didn't associate the man with the Thousand Corpse sect. No matter whether it was Ronghuan Xian, Corpse 2, or the Ninth Underworld King, all of them had corpse chi, but in front of their eyes, the cultured and refined man like an erudite scholar really couldn't be associated with the Thousand Corpse sect. According to what Corpse 2, Corpse Boss was more perfect than he was. It really was perfect to the point that he didn't seem like a corpse returning to life. The marks of old age could still be seen on Corpse 2's body, but Corpse Boss truly shed off the old skin and obtained new life. "How truly unexpected," Ling Han said sincerely. Hearing Corpse Boss's name, one think of a person with furrowed brows and blazing eyes, looking all murderous, truly a huge gap from the one before their eyes. Corpse Boss smiled faintly and said, "I very rarely kill people, but facing those worthy of my intervention, I'll always treat them to tea." "Does this count as the beheading tea one?" Ling Han said. "You could say so." Corpse Boss nodded. "Can we chat before it's finished?" "Of course." "Please, please." The two completely didn't seem like enemies, talking cheerfully and humorously. Corpse Boss was well-read and could talk volubly no matter what topic they were on, while Ling Han wasn't to be outdone either. He lived 200 years in the previous lifetime, and obviously read extensively, so very few could rival his abundance of knowledge. As they talked and drank, the pot of tea was soon finished. After the two drank all the tea inside their cups, they suddenly stopped speaking. Corpse Boss slowly stored away the teacups inside a spatial spirit tool, while Ling Han stood up so that Corpse Boss could also store the table and chair at the same time. "If you can block 10 of my moves, I'll let you go once," Corpse Boss said. Ling Han didn't dare to be careless. He couldn't see through Corpse Boss's cultivation at all. According to what Corpse 2 had said, Corpse Boss had always been cultivating in the pond of the underworld and was extremely like to have reached the Shattering Void tier before he left. If Corpse Boss was at the Shattering Void tier, then he really could strike the firmament and destroy the depth of hell, strikingly powerful. 10 moves. If Ling Han resisted with his own battle prowess, it would probably be extremely difficult. Ling Han unleashed the Revere Life Sword, prepared for battle. Corpse Boss very casually swatted his hand at Ling Han. Hong! The world dimmed as a large hand appeared out of thin air, pressing towards Ling Han. Nothing fancy, it was just an extremely simple palm attack. However, the palm's power shockingly reached the peak stage of the heaven tier. Ling Han greeted it with his sword, but was immediately sent flying, trembling all over and almost spurting out blood. It was extremely shocking. His physique clearly reached the toughness of 9th tier rare metal, but his internal organs were still shocked under the attack as if overturning seas and rivers, being extremely hard to bear. The second move. Corpse Boss swung his palm. The power increased a whole lot unimaginably, and although it hadn't reached the Shattering Void tier, it really wasn't far from it. This guy was undoubtedly at the Shattering Void tier. 10 moves, with each move increasing in battle prowess. On the third move, the power would probably reach the Shattering Void tier. Ling Han took another hit, and his entire person was smacked into a sheet of paper, becoming extremely flat. However, such a terrifying attack was neutralized in half, and the remaining half he could completely take on with his physique. Coupling hardness with softness? Corpse Boss revealed an astounded expression. "I've never expected your physical arts to reach such a high standard, But this is only the second move. He swung his right hand again, throwing out the third palm. This time, it really reached the shattering void tier. Even the skies trembled and the earth split, groaning soundlessly under the shattering void tier's battle prowess. Ling Han had no more hesitation and swung his right hand, spreading out 108 short swords, forming the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. Pong! The large hand hit, but was forcibly stopped as an ice dragon appeared, blocking the palm. Corpse 2 looked surprised again. You really surprise people? You're actually a formation master as well? This person was a little more than 20, but he not only had amazing attainments in martial arts, but also had an identity of a heaven-grade alchemist. Now, he even unleashed a 10th-tier formation. How truly incredible. How could one person display such accomplishments? Corpse 2 said that you might be some shattering void tier's reincarnation with the soul of the previous lifetime. Being able to use the realm power seems somewhat reasonable, Corpse Boss said. People were limited by time, and even if Ling Han started to study the 3 Daos meticulously once he was born, 20 years' time was by no means enough to get any single one to the extreme, let alone 3 Daos together. Except for a shattering void tier elite's reincarnation, there was no second kind of possibility. But reincarnation and rebirth, this was completely unheard of. Take him and Corpse 2 as examples. Although they were still with the bodies they had several 10,000 years ago, their souls had not a bit of relationship with their previous one. The body was indeed the same, but could it still count as the previous life's continuance? The spirit's reincarnation? Inconceivable. It could shock the entire world if word were to spread. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "There are 7 more moves." Corpse Boss's expression was stern as he raised his right hand in front of his chest and condensed a shocking light ray in his palm with veined pattern surfacing, emitting an ancient presence. Was this his previous life's martial intent? Ling Han was somewhat gloomy. He clearly knew that Corpse Boss was accumulating power for an ultimate move, yet he could only stare blankly. He pondered and decided that he couldn't be so passive, unleashing Sunset Bow. Blocking 10 moves was what the deal was, but there was no mention that he could only take the beating. He drew the bow, mounted an arrow, and activated the Eye of Truth, searching for Corpse Boss's weakness. Ling Han shockingly discovered that there wasn't a trace of any weakness on Corpse Boss. How was that possible? There were Lees in every wine, and even the world's finest defensive arts definitely wouldn't be without a trace of a weakness. It was unrealistic. But now, a truly perfect being appeared. From the information fed back by the Eye of Truth, his arrow would be useless no matter which direction it was shot in. Ling Han immediately realized that it wasn't Corpse Boss who had no weak points, but that his own strength was too weak. Shattering Void Tier elites were too powerful to the point that even if they didn't move, their static defense was almost flawless, and it wouldn't matter no matter how much Heaven Tier elites attacked. At least Ling Han alone couldn't break through it. This was the gap in tier. Ling Han stood at the peak of martial arts in his previous life, but it was only the Heaven Tier, and Shattering Void Tier elites were also extremely mysterious existences to him. And now, he was going to go against such a being. Fortunately, there was still Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation. Ling Han operated his strength to the extreme, and if even the Ice Dragon couldn't rival Corpse Boss, he would have to consider hiding in the Black Tower or using up Black Tower's one-time power boost. Though a great pity, it was better than dying here. Corpse Boss attacked, throwing out a palm, and countless large stars instantly fell from the sky, as if a meteor shower was raining down on Ling Han. These weren't large stars, but something that used origin power as cores, gathering spirit chi, and under the blessing of martial intent, they were heavier than stars, so it wasn't excessive to call them large stars that rained down cluster after cluster. This was an ultimate move unleashed by a shattering Void Tier elite. It was ineffably terrifying. The Ice Dragon roared, crying out repeatedly as it charged towards the sky. Instantly, the sky burst forth with shocking light rays, and even Ling Han couldn't help but lower his head, not daring to stare at it. He was within the Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation, which was also a powerful defense, enough to resist against the impact of shattering Void Tier 5 stars. Corpse Boss made multiple snatching movements with both hands, Countless large stars continued to fall, flickering, and even the sun's radiance was completely concealed. The ice dragon was extremely formidable. It possessed battle prowess of the shattering void tier 7 stars, even being undying. Even if it was knocked apart, it wouldn't matter, for with the accumulation of spirit chi, it could immediately recover. Its root lay in the formation, and with the formation unbroken and there being no lack of spirit chi, it could exist forever. Corpse Boss was very strong, but not superior to battle prowess of shattering void tier 5 stars. Not only could he not deal with the formation, he was even hunted down by the ice dragon. If it weren't for his extremely formidable physique, he might have been instantly killed. He stopped and muttered, "One more move." Ling Han was assured within. Although he completely couldn't see through a shattering void tier elite strength, he could still make a judgment based on the confrontation between the ice dragon and Corpse Boss. Corpse Boss's strength was roughly shattering void tier 4 stars, which was also when he released an ultimate move. Unfortunately, Ling Han only relied on the ice dragon's strength, or else it would be even possible for him to oppress Corpse Boss. After all, formations couldn't grow legs to carry out a pursuit and attack. The ice dragon could at most move in the range of the formation, and would disappear when leaving it, for it was created by the formation. There was one more move. Did Corpse Boss have an even stronger ultimate move? Corpse Boss spread open his right hand, and a crystal-shaped skeletal hand appeared. A skeletal hand should look terrifying and ghastly, but this crystal skeletal hand seemed like the most exquisite piece of art, without any ghastly feel to it and instead full of grandeur. But examining closely, one would see that there were countless veined patterns on the skeletal hand, so numerous that they were uncountable. Ling Han was shocked within, and said, "Could you also have cut this off your own body in your previous life?" Corpse 2's bone mallet was made from his own femur. For a being that reached such a tier, even severed limbs could regenerate, but they couldn't regrow rapidly the way Ling Han's did. Using one's own bone as a spirit tool would definitely be the most comfortable. More than using a spirit tool nourished by oneself. Corpse Boss shook his head and said, "No, this hand is certainly something obtained in my previous life, but it's definitely not from my own body. According to my many years of research and conjectures, it might be a divine being's hand." What? Ling Han was shocked. A divine being's hand. Wait, didn't this realm not allow divine spirit elites to appear? No, it was just a severed hand, at most seen as a divine tool. Even Black Tower, Heaven Transformation Bowl, and Bottle of Curse could exist, so why couldn't a divine being's hand? The key was what sort of power it could unleash. Is it strong? Ling Han said with a smile. The more dangerous the moment, the more relaxed his mind was. Very strong, Corpse Boss said solemnly. It can kill normal shattering void tier elites, and if not for the realm power suppression, it can be even stronger. Then I shall see, Ling Han said, brandishing the Revere Life Sword, which also became stronger when encountering a strong opponent. He also took out the Heaven Transformation Bowl. Could the skeletal hand be absorbed and refined into a few drops of divine being's bone marrow? Corpse Boss grasped the crystal skeletal hand, and Wang, the veined patterns lit up. Quang, the sky immediately echoed with a clap of thunder. Sensed by the heaven and earth, the dark clouds rolled, gathering densely above Corpse Boss as if a heavenly tribulation was going to descend to kill him. That crystal skeletal hand was too powerful. It threatened the existence of this realm. The heavenly Tao was also startled, and prepared to intervene at any time, opening a spatial fissure to expel it. Ling Han had seen the look of the heaven and earth unleashing its might. In Shuexian's memories, those as powerful as divine beings were immediately devoured and expelled once they erupted with power not belonging to this realm. However, the dark clouds were rolling, but lightning never struck down, and no spatial fissure opened up. Apparently, the crystal skeletal hand was strong, but not strong to the point of making heaven and earth expel it. What a headache! Ling Han unleashed the Heaven Transformation Bowl, and Wang, the treasured bowl, lit up and began to absorb everything around it unrestrainedly. Even normal rocks weren't let off, yet it had no way to fend against that crystal skeletal hand. Apparently, the Heaven Transformation Bowl couldn't deal with it. The levels of the two things were about the same, so Heaven Transformation Bowl couldn't do it. Ling Han retrieved the Heaven Transformation Bowl and fully activated the Revere Life Sword. Even though he carved out a 10th tier formation, he still had a hard time grasping the formations on the Revere Life Sword. Till now, he still only activated 7 formation patterns, yet the formation patterns on it reached the number of over 10,000. Sensing the threat posed by the crystal skeletal hand, the Revere Life Sword began to awaken on its own. Its killing intent spread out, influencing the air to spiral on its own. Inside the vortex, there was a gaseous sword, pitifully small, yet it could make shattering void tier elites feel fear when they saw it. Corpse Boss's eyes instinctively burst with a chilling glare as he said, "Your sword is remarkable. I seem to have some memory of it, but I can't remember." Would shattering void tier beings forget things? Of course it was impossible. Then what he meant by being unable to remember was definitely a memory from his previous life. After all, it was an old corpse that had a newly birthed soul, which could be seen as a completely different being. But for Revere Life Sword to stimulate Corpse Boss's memory from the previous life, that was even more terrifying. How deeply engraved did the memory have to be for it to connect two souls through several hundred thousands of years? It was probably deeply engraved in his bones. What Ling Han was shocked with was not that Corpse Boss's body could remember an entire formation over several hundred thousand of years, but with Ma Duobao, who created the Revere Life Sword. The strength of this person was absolutely shocking. To be able to engrave the memory of a formation deep into an elite's bones, in harsher words, wasn't that fear deep to the bones? Then, how terrifying was Ma Duobao, who was able to create the formation? The world's #1 formation master, entirely worthy of such a title. No wonder he could stand as #1 above the rest on the martial arts stone, calling himself #1 and looking down on the world. It indeed wasn't big talk, but he was truly powerful. However, what sort of formation was it exactly? Hong. The crystal skeletal hand was completely activated and turned into a slim hand with blood and flesh. Even if it was only a hand, it was charming, and had definitely belonged to an exceptional celestial fairy. However, the delicate hand turned into the size of a lofty mountain, smashing towards Ling Han. Nothing fancy, only the terrifying display of martial intent, emitting an arrogant and domineering presence. Nothing can block it. I'll shatter it all. It seemed to say something like that. The Revere Life Sword also blossomed with dazzling light as over 10,000 veined patterns all lit up, and shio. It slipped out of Ling Han's hand and rose into the air on its own, standing off against the delicate hand. The two clashed, and the sword struck the palm, bursting forth with world-dazzling light, once again blinding people. After the dazzling light, Revere Life Sword and the lily-white hand fought fiercely, exchanging blows constantly and bursting forth with terrifyingly powerful chi. Ling Han hurriedly summoned everyone over and guarded them with Ice Dragon Ground Blast formation, or else, if they were struck once, they'd definitely be smashed to pieces. Corpse Boss shook his head, stopped the battle on his own accord, retrieved the crystal skeletal hand, and said, 10 moves. I can't kill you. Ling Han's battle spirit was ablaze, and he said, Brother Corpse, I look forward to fighting with you the next time. Truly coming to grips. Corpse Boss was refined and cultured, wearing a smile on his face, and had no sign of frustration, appearing greatly generous in spirit. He said, Then you'd better cultivate faster. The stage of the Shattering Void tier isn't that easy to reach. I only crossed over it without hindrance because of my former life, or else. It's extremely, extremely difficult. Even he used 2 extremelies, so it was clear that humanity's peak indeed wasn't easy to reach. This time, I'm indebted to Brother Corpse for treating me to great tea. Next time, I'll treat you to good wine, Ling Han said with a smile. Corpse Boss couldn't help but smile and said, Although I don't drink wine, I'm willing to make an exception for you. Please, please. Corpse Boss turned his body and took a step, appearing several miles out. To be so courteous after a life and death battle, it was a first for Ling Han. However, Corpse Boss indeed had a remarkable bearing, which gave him a favorable impression and desire to be his friend. However, he is after all one of 1,000 corpse sects, and in the future, I'll inevitably fight against the 1,000 corpse sect, and it might really be a fight to the death. Ling Han sighed deeply. Hong! An astonishing battle shock wave suddenly came from afar. The stars in the sky shattered continuously, and even a large cluster of stars could be seen falling down in the daytime, being obstructed by the astral winds, burning and turning into meteorites. It was a battle of the shattering void tier, and it just happened to be in the direction Corpse Boss was headed. Did he encounter a formidable enemy? Ling Han wasn't worried. Shattering void tier elite speeds were about the same, so if one side wanted to run, they could completely escape, which was the reason why shattering void tier elites were almost undying. If I couldn't win, I'd just run, and what could you do? Unless it was someone who cultivated a mystical power like Thunderclap Ninth Heaven, then no one could catch up when running, and no one could escape when chasing. However, if a shattering void tier elite was willing to ignite his life essence, they could still erupt with high speeds, which was still unresolvable. The great fight in the distance didn't continue for long and soon calmed down, but it was only an instant before a terrifying oppressive pressure assaulted them, making people's skin crack, which was extremely hard to bear. A red-haired girl appeared in the distance with yellowish-pink wings, which spread out over 3,000 meters, but they were shrinking rapidly, and in the time of breath, the wings were completely gone. Yi Shuang Shuang. The girl held a crystal-shaped skeletal hand in her hand, playing with it absorbedly. Hey! Ling Han shouted. Io. Who is it? Scared this lady. Yi Shuang Shuang put away the crystal skeletal hand in a hurry. When she saw Ling Han and the others, she couldn't help but be puzzled, and said to herself, strange. This lady was clearly walking back. Why'd she bump into these guys? Ling Han pointed out, you walked in the wrong direction. The Imperial City is the other way. Hee. Thanks for reminder. Later. Yi Shuang Shuang turned to leave. Wait! Ling Han shouted in a hurry to stop her. Weren't you keeping watch over the Imperial City? Why did you run over here? Yi Shuang Shuang shrugged and said, sensed a great battle here from the Imperial City, so I came here to watch the fun. Ling Han rolled his eyes and said, not just watch the fun, is it? But also steal someone else's things. This woman had apparently arrived long ago, but didn't intervene all along, yet waited till after Corpse Boss left to catch up to him and snatch the crystal skeletal hand. One couldn't help but say that this woman was too powerful. The might released by the crystal skeletal hand was so terrifying, but she still forcibly suppressed it. Poor Corpse Boss had to be very gloomy, right? However, it was unfortunate for him to meet a being from the divine realm. She wasn't ordinarily strong even with her strength suppressed, at least not what the current him could rival. Perhaps it took the Lunar King, and even elites like Ma Duobao to counter her. Yi Shuang Shuang giggled and said, you don't know, this skeletal hand is extremely likely to be from a heavenly body tier powerhouse, and if the essence within could be extracted, this lady might be able to restore all her vigor. What heavenly body tier? And the Imperial City is that far from here you can still sense it? Ling Han questioned closely. TSK only separated by such tiny distance. It'd be strange if this lady couldn't sense it. This realm's rules are too simple. This lady is absolutely like an almighty god here. Yi Shuang Shuang said disdainfully. Heavenly body tier? Is this a divine being's tier? Ling Han asked. He could conclude that divine being also had relative superiority, but he didn't know how it was divided. AI, you're so annoying. A mere deity transformation tier warrior concerned about the matters of the divine realm. Yi Shuang Shuang said with disdain. Ling Han gave a ha, and said, believe it or not, I'll advance into the shattering void tier within 10 years, and breaking into the divine realm is also just around the corner. Seemingly awed by Ling Han's heroic spirit, Yi Shuang Shuang was taken aback shortly, then said, all right, then this lady will do a good deed and educate you in advance. But after you know, you'd better not be shocked and unable to recover. Tisk, am I such a weak-willed person? Ling Han obviously wouldn't believe it. Don't be so sure. Yi Shuang Shuang played with the skeletal hand and said, divine beings are separated into 5 large tiers: Mountain River, Sun Moon, Heavenly Body, Eternal River, and Genesis, but every large tier isn't divided into 9 layers. Instead, there are only 4 small tiers, which are low extreme, medium extreme, high extreme, and consummate. Not to mention the large levels, the strength gaps between the small levels are as large as the sky. You're now in the deity transformation tier, yet you can fight the heaven tier, crossing one large tier, and can be called a genius in the mortal realm, but after advancing into the divine tier, even crossing one small tier is difficult. Hearing those words, Ling Han really was somewhat shocked. He could win against an opponent by crossing an entire large tier, but despite such endowments and freakishness, once at the divine level it was actually hard to cross even one small tier. You're shocked, right? Shuang snickered. It's precisely because every small tier is hard to cross that even small extreme, medium extreme, and high extreme are divided into early stage, middle stage, late stage, and peak stage. According to this lady's prediction, you're a genius that can fight against peak stage at early stage. In the divine realm, such geniuses might not be everywhere, but surely are not a few. Ling Han's heart thumped. If he claimed second at fighting at the same tier amongst the younger generation of the vast lands, no, amongst the martial artists in the entire vast lands, no one would dare claim first, and it would still be so even if the Sword Emperor and the Setting Sun Saber Emperor were dragged back to this tier again. On one land, the number 1 in 10,000 years actually couldn't rank amongst the top geniuses in the divine realm. Hiss! How freakish was the divine realm! Thinking again, the divine realm's resources definitely surpassed the mortal realms by countless times, and perhaps there were some nature-defying things that could skyrocket a martial artist's battle prowess, just like heavenly luck stone that Ling Han had once refined. Could that not exist in the divine realm? Perhaps there were even more powerful things. In a world so small that even Heavenly Emperor of Thunder and Fire looked down on the vast lands as if they were a mayfly, Ling Han could grow to a level comparable to the divine level's geniuses. Then after he entered the divine realm, could he not become even stronger? So what about the finest geniuses? I can surpass them. Ling Han instantly recovered his confidence, and a smile surfaced at the corner of his lips, full of fighting spirit. At this moment, he itched to charge into the divine realm to fight against the Sword Emperor and the Setting Sun Saber Emperor, and then take back Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden to make her the daughter-in-law of the Ling family and warm his bed every day. Ugh! Shuang shivered. Why did your eyes suddenly become so perverted? Damn brat. Were you fantasizing about this lady? You? Hee. Ling Han shrugged. What's that supposed to mean? Do you think this lady isn't beautiful enough? Shuang was angered. How baffling. Ling Han diverged from this substanceless topic and said, how about you? What tier? And how many levels can your battle prowess surpass? Shuang placed her hand on her hips proudly and said, this lady is an expert at Sun Moon tier. I reached small extremes middle stage, but being trapped for 10,000 years, my cultivation already dropped to small extremes early stage, and the battle prowess even dropped to mountain river tier small extremes early stage. No wonder she could still easily suppress Corpse Boss. Despite being suppressed by the realm's power, she definitely could unleash the power at the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier, with an unknown amount of stars of battle prowess. At this lady's peak stage, she can fight late stage at early stage, crossing 2 small tiers. This is called a 2-star genius in the divine realm. Shuang saw that Ling Han was totally unconcerned, and immediately went on. What do you know? In the divine realm, crossing a small tier is already remarkable, called a 1-star genius, and it's 1 in hundreds of millions. You think that there are mediocre people amongst those that can become gods. That was true. Placed in the vast lands, which Shattering Void tier elite wasn't a genius amongst geniuses, and to defeat them surpassing tiers was difficult. It was the same placed in the divine realm. Being able to ascend to god tier, unless it was from being pumped up by taking medicine, weren't those who broke through with their own diligent cultivation also geniuses amongst geniuses? To still win surpassing tiers, it would be hard. In a similar fashion, above that are 2-star geniuses, 3-star geniuses, and 4-star geniuses. As far as this lady knows, there are only a few 4-star geniuses, and there was once a 5-star genius, recorded only in the ancient books. Shuang said unhurriedly. Ling Han was confident in himself. He'd only cultivated the first layer of indestructible heaven scroll, which already made him the #1 genius recognized by the martial arts stone. If he were to master the second layer, what level could he reach? He looked at Yi Shuang with a smile and said, "I have a matter to discuss with you." "What? You're coveting this lady's treasure?" As if guarding from a thief, Yi Shuang held the crystal skeletal hand tightly. "Am I a person that lacking in class?" "Hard to say." Ling Han was speechless for a while, then said, "Even if I covet it, I can't beat you, right?" "Yeah." Yi Shuang finally stopped worrying and said, "What matter do you want to discuss?" "I lack the art for the 10th level and want to borrow one from you first," Ling Han said. The arts he grasped only reached the 9th level, which could only be cultivated till the peak stage of the heaven tier. Theoretically, he indeed could create his own 10th level art and advance into the shattering void tier, but how much time would that take? Even if he already stood on the grounds of predecessors, it would still take hundreds of years. He couldn't wait that long. "Ha!" Yi Shuang immediately laughed loudly and said proudly, "Sure. But what will you use to exchange? Even if it's just borrowing, it can't be a verbal statement without proof. You have to take something as pledge, right? Tell me, what do you want?" Ling Han was prepared to be taken advantage of. After all, it was worth at least 100 years, which was more valuable than any treasure. However, he definitely wouldn't take out the Black Tower, the Heaven Transformation Bowl, or the Revere Life Sword. At worst, he would just sneak into the 5 great sects and think of ways to steal. With the Black Tower in hand, it wasn't something impossible. "You've come all the way from a small country in the desolate north. This lady doesn't believe that you really relied on your own hard work. Quick, tell this lady, what mystic treasure exactly do you have?" Yi Shuang's eyes sparkled, filled with curiosity. Ling Han said unhurriedly, "Actually, I'm the reincarnation of a shattering void tier, so my cultivation speed is obviously fast." Yi Shuang rolled her eyes at him and said, "A soul's reincarnation in the divine realm is almost impossible, unless one obtained the exceptional divine item, reincarnation flower. Like hell this lady believes you. Besides, if you were a shattering void tier's reincarnation, would you need a 10th layer art? Yes, this chick isn't stupid." Ling Han's heart raced. So, a soul's reincarnation in the divine realm was also extremely rare. Hiss, exactly how high did the level of the Black Tower reach? Not only making his soul reincarnate, and first preserving it for 10,000 years, allowing him to constantly fathom indestructible heaven scroll during the 10,000 years. He'd already overestimated the Black Tower, but now, he seemed to have underestimated it. "Sai, you don't believe it even if I tell you. I can't help it." Ling Han shrugged. He definitely wouldn't reveal the secret of the Black Tower. "Then, the 10th level art you want, you can say goodbye to it," Yi Shuang said unhappily. Then he'd say goodbye. There was nothing impossible in the world, and all he had to do was take time to think of another way. He was still a while away from the peak stage of the heaven tier anyway. "Go back," he called Helian Sunxue and the others. He had to quickly take care of the problem of the East region. East region, second only to the middle state in terms of martial arts and on par with the South region, both having heaven tier elites. The invasion of the North region this time was originally rejected by the East region's elites, but they couldn't disobey the 5 great sects' will, and had to sortie several heaven tier elites, bringing large amounts of deity transformation tier, spiritual infant tier, and flower blossom tier warriors while opening the region barrier with a 10th tier spirit tool lent by the 5 great sects to launch an attack on the North region. A combination like this was obviously invincible. They conquered cities and strongholds along the way almost without any effort as each city chose to surrender very cooperatively. However, the East region's elites didn't notice that almost every household worshipped a Black Tower, which still continually accumulated the spirit of the people. The power of the nation could only be devoured and annihilated in a war between nations. They were now like robbers, being able to capture territory, but unable to destroy the hearts of the people. Of course, if the imperial city and the emperor were destroyed, then with the country's roots dead, the country wouldn't be a country. It'd be equivalent to hitting where it hurt, being just as deadly. The various regions would cooperate obviously because they received orders. Ling Han already returned to the imperial city. On the way, he intentionally lured the enemy to venture deep, making them go deep into Great Ling Empire's interior, where he would annihilate them all. The opponent pressed on very fast, and left Flower Blossom tier martial artists to keep watch over the seized cities, while the elites continued to march west, towards the imperial city. Ling Han, I have a matter to discuss with you. Right when he returned to the imperial city, Ling Han was dragged over by Hellion Sun Shui. Ling Han was startled. Was this chick trying to be lewd in broad daylight? What's with your expression? Hellion Sun Shui pulled him to the side and said, The sea race's people have already come. HM? Ling Han looked at her and said, Where? They were sent fleeing by Yi Shuang Shuang. Hellion Xianxia said, This time, not only Xinyu royal family came, my family also did. Originally, I wanted to hide from them, but knowing the truth about the settling, I felt that my family could be won over. So I wrote a letter to have that person from my family bring it to my father. In other words, Hellion's royal family knows that you're here? Ling Han said. Yes. Hellion Sun Shui nodded. If you think I've done something wrong, I can leave, and I definitely won't implicate you. Ling Han pressed her down on his thigh, greeted her but with a bunch of slaps and said, You think I'm the kind of person to throw away the mother of my child? You ought to take a beating. Good beating. Good beating. Hunyo immediately jumped out from behind a stone pillar and threw a kick, and said, Ling Han, let's beat her to death and eat stewed dragon beat? Whoever contested with her for Ling Han would be treated as a target that needed to be destroyed. But, unfortunately, Ling Han didn't allow it, giving Hunyo no choice. Hellion Sun Shui, however, turned over and rode on top of Ling Han. Her almond-shaped eyes burst with flames as she tore open Ling Han's clothes and said fiercely, How many times do you owe me? EU, EW, EW. Hunyo covered her eyes with both hands in a hurry. The sea girl was really too dirty and was going to corrupt Nyo's pure spirit. Hunyo's still here. Aren't you afraid of corrupting children? Ling Han hurriedly turned over again, pressing Hellion Sun Shui below his body. CC. Nyo also wants to play. Hunyo pounced on top. She thought that the two were just playing. With Hunyo present, Hellion Sun Shui obviously couldn't claim back her debt, and her temper naturally remained somewhat irritable. Fortunately, Ling Jianshui woke up and made her rush to breastfeed. Hunyo looked on by the side and said, Why doesn't little Snow look anything like Ling Han? He's still young, so it's obviously hard to tell, Lu Yutong said. She and Li Sichong would help look after Ling Jianshui, who was Ling family's current little beloved baby. Everyone of all statuses pampered him to the bones. Yaya! The lit fellow chuckled and reached out his small hand to grab Lu Yutong's breasts. Apparently, he thought that Lu Yutong's breasts were more ample and should taste more delicious, making Hellion Sun Shui quite depressed. After a few days, the East Region's elite coalition already arrived several hundred meters from the imperial city. They would be able to pull out Great Ling Empire's backbone in the next step, thoroughly destroying the newborn king's court. Ling Han commanded everyone out. It was time to draw the net. East Region's elites fought smoothly all the way here. Besides, who didn't know that North Region's martial arts level was the lowest? Thus, each one of them was obviously proud and arrogant, not thinking that North Region had any sort of power that could obstruct them. They found it strange that, with North Region's inadequate strength, they would go as far as to make Middle State that nervous, forcing them to sortie almost all their top powers. Look, didn't they easily advance to the Great Ling Empire's imperial city? Now everything would be resolved. Ling Han brought Hunyo to greet the enemy. I am Great Ling Empire's son of heaven, and if you all dare to assault my empire, you shall all die. But considering you guys are also just obeying orders, I'll give you all a chance. Surrender now. I can spare your lives. Ling Han said, his voice rumbling throughout the entire imperial city, even through the totem, resounding in every single city. This was miraculous effect of totems, which could connect the entire Great Ling Empire. Ha 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 ha. East Region's elites were taken aback shortly, then couldn't help but burst into laughter. This brat was really the emperor, not just a laughing stock. A mere deity transformation tier warrior dared to demand they surrender. What a real exaggerated opinion of his own abilities. Brat, I'll kill you. A deity transformation tier warrior jumped out. He looked to be 40 years old, but his real age was at least over 200, which could be clearly seen from qi and blood. Ling Han walked over in large strides and said, "If you can block this emperor's one move, this emperor will spare your life." Bullshit. Watch me kill you in one move. That person was furious and charged over while brandishing a large saber. The boiling presence shocked the air. His strength was quite astonishing, and he could be called an expert even in the deity transformation tier. Ling Han had his hands behind his back. The moment the opponent's assault arrived, he casually threw out a palm. Pa! That person instantly split into pieces. Deity transformation tier blood essence propagated heaven and earth, turning into multicolored divine light, an extremely shocking thing. Ling Han withdrew his hand and said indifferently, "There aren't many chances left? Is there still no one willing to surrender?" The palm he'd displayed shocked the elites of the East region. That deity transformation tier warrior wasn't weak, being a renowned elite in the East region, sufficient to rank in the top hundreds. However, such an elite was actually killed by a single palm, demonstrating just how astonishing Ling Han's strength was. They underestimated the North region. They never would have thought that there was actually such an elite here. A heaven-tier elite walked out, wearing a grim smile and said, "Indeed remarkable. A deity transformation tier warrior that has heaven-tier battle prowess, worthy of being called a peerless genius. But do you know that establishing a nation is something that goes against the heavenly laws?" Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "May I ask, how does it go against the heavenly laws? The rules agreed on by the old ancestors, what else?" That heaven tier said coldly, "These people were brainwashed into stupidity. They obviously had to be convinced through a beating." Ling Han waved his hand and sneered, "If your old ancestor tells you to eat shit, do you eat it? Crazy ravings." That heaven-tier elite reprimanded. "The old ancestors' rules have weathered tens of thousands of years and are obviously the universal truth." Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "You fool, what old ancestors' rules? Those were clearly drawn up by elites. I'm strong. I have a say. That's the constant truth of all ages. If that's the case, then this old man will convince you through a beating." That heaven tier walked in large strides. His spirit and qi burst forth as if a blazing furnace. "Then I'll take you as the chicken and kill you for the monkeys to see," Ling Han said with a smile. Impudence. That heaven tier elite was infuriated. He was a heaven tier elite, a supreme being in the East region, and now he was actually likened to a chicken. How could this not make him furious? He snorted and unleashed a long azure whip. With a shake, the whip immediately straightened, looking as if a long spear. "Senior Zhang's furious, he's serious. That's for sure. Senior Zhang is a well-known figure in our East region who can rank in the top 5 amongst the strongest. This brat dared to humiliate Senior Zhang. He's absolutely asking to die." The East region's elites discussed animatedly, obviously thinking that Ling Han was dead for sure. That heaven-tier elite's surname was Jiawan with a single character named Zhang, but no one dared to call him directly by his name, and all called him by Senior Zhang. Jia Zhang was one of the leading figures of East region's elites on this expedition. His intervention could be seen as a king going against a king, the battle of the strongest of the two parties. Of course, from the East region's elite's perspective, the battle was without a doubt going to be Jia Zhang's victory. Ling Han extended his right hand and said indifferently, "I'll use only one hand." Fuck. Flames instantly flickered above Jia Zhangji's head. An elite that reached his tier, even without cultivating fire-type arts, could still draw on heaven and earth's spirit qi to turn it into fire with a single thought. He was obviously furious. A mere deity transformation tier junior, no matter how amazing his talent, he actually dared not to use both hands against him, making him furious to the point of bursting out fire from both eyes. This junior was seriously seeking his own death. He brandished the whip spear and attacked Ling Han. Ling Han had never seen such a weapon, and couldn't help but be curious, shifting his feet to see what exactly was remarkable about such a skill. Don't say, the spirit tool truly was somewhat out of the ordinary. It could be thrust like a spear, but after it was blocked, it could turn into a soft whip, forming lashing attacks. Veined patterns were also branded on top of it, and after it was activated, it emitted a light blue light, its powers astonishing. For him to be able to rank amongst the strongest in the East region, it was obviously not from bluffing. Unfortunately, his opponent was Ling Han. My physique can compare to 9th tier rare metal, how do you plan to harm me? Even if melted with strange fire, it wouldn't take a short period of time, at least taking several days and nights to refine. Although Jia Zhang was very energetic in his attacks and seemed to have the advantage on the scene, pressuring Ling Han, but in reality, Ling Han wasn't threatened at all. Ling Han simply wanted to look at the whip spear's transformation, which was why he never fought back all along. Senior Zhang, kill this heaven-daring guy. Yeah, slaughter this brat so that we can return to the East region. This place's spirit chi is too thin, and staying here one more day would be the loss of one more day. Everyone shouted one after another, hoping that the errand of killing Ling Han would be taken care of quickly so that they could return to the East region as soon as possible. Jia Zhang obviously very much wanted to take care of Ling Han, but he knew inside that Ling Han only seemed to be at a disadvantage, but was actually extremely at ease, and he definitely couldn't take him down in a short amount of time. He couldn't help but try to taunt him. Junior, you dodging here and there? Exactly how long do you want to dodge? Behind you is the Imperial City. Where else can you dodge? Ling Han just happened to be tired of watching. With a smile, he said, You want to be defeated that badly? All right, as you wish. He extended his right hand, and golden light radiated instantly. He already operated the earth overturning seal and pressed it towards the opponent. This was a mystical power. Ling Han had already cultivated the earth overturning seal to the point where both hands could execute it simultaneously. He could also use it with one hand. Thus, his battle prowess was only slightly weaker even though he only used the right hand. He instantly turned the tables, and on the scene, his imposing manner immediately took the initiative. The heaven-tier elites he'd encountered recently were Su Xiaoran, Corpse 2, and the like, making him feel that heaven-tier elites were very powerful. But now that it changed to Jia Zhang, he instantly felt something different. Heaven-tier was so weak. Jia Zhang could be called a supreme elite in the East region, but he couldn't possibly compare to Su Xiaoran and the others. What? Senior Zhang's actually being suppressed. How's it possible? My God! This must be fake. The East region's elites all cried out, covering their heads. This was too fake. A deity transformation tier junior was able to pressure a heaven tier elite in a fight, and it was also a veteran heaven tier warrior who became well known long ago. Their view on life was about to collapse. Another heaven tier elite snorted and said, Now's not the time to fight solo. Our mission is to wipe out Great Ling King's court. And now the nation's master is in front of us. Brother Tu, Brother Ma, and Brother Zhang. Attack with this old man together and eliminate this junior. Okay. The other heaven tier elites nodded one after another. Indeed, it wasn't a martial arts contest, and there wasn't a need to respect the rule of 1 versus 1. A total of 7 heaven tier elites walked out and surrounded Ling Han. Hunyo instantly jumped out and said, Nyo will be your opponent. Ling Han laughed and said, No, I can take care of them. Since these people were attacking together, he didn't need to keep the promise of using only one hand and unleashed the Revere Life Sword at once. With a brandish of the sword, light soared into the sky. With the blessing of the power of the nation, he deployed the mysterious 3,000, and 3,100 rays of sword light burst forth immediately, enveloping the 8 heaven-tier elites at the same time. What? Jia Zhang and the others had their eyes popping out with shock. What, how could there possibly be such a swift and fierce sword art in the world? Attacking 8 heaven-tier elites at the same time and making each of them feel that it couldn't be resisted. Their realization came already too late. The sword light swept by, and the 8 heaven-tier warriors fell down, all dying instantly. In the East region's elites camp, only silence remained. 2M strong. How could there be such a freak, killing heaven-tier elites like reaping vegetables? Could this be a shattering void-tier elite? How could they resist? They couldn't resist at all. Ling Han put away his sword and said indifferently, "How about it? Who wants to surrender or still stubbornly resist till the end?" The East Region's party's heaven-tier warriors had all died in battle, and only deity transformation tier 1s remained. Facing Ling Han, who was like a god, they no longer had the least bit of desire to fight. Some people surrendered at once, but some people chose to run. They didn't want to become someone's servant. Hunyo displayed her prowess and turned into a lightning, grasping one after another. Who could even escape from her hands? After luring the enemy to go deep, block the enemy's retreat and destroy them, the East Region's army was declared completely annihilated. Ling Han summoned every single one of them to surrender. Faced with death, there were very few people who could look death in the eyes calmly. Besides, they were commanded to attack. They themselves had no unresolvable grievance with Ling Han, so why back it with their lives? Could they really have the Middle State bestow them a title of a martyr? After taking care of the East Region's elites, he had them take back the cities that were seized. The East Region's elites were all extremely gloomy. Their running back and forth felt just like playing make-believe, absolutely like a joke. After recovering the lost territory, Ling Han had the East Region's elites return to properly handle the work of East Region's various large sections. After he took down the West Region, he would then consider leading an army either north or east. After a few more days, the Sea Race's people came. It was a shattering void tier from Hellion family, who brought Hellion Rong's personally written letter and delivered it to Ling Han and Hellion Sun Shui to read. Hellion Rong was the current generation's leader of Hellion royal family, and was also called King Hellion. He was also Hellion Sun Shui's father. The general idea in the letter was that the matter Hellion Xianxia mentioned was too shocking. A few words in a letter weren't enough to convince anyone, and there were many questions that needed Ling Han and Hellion Sun Shui to see the North Sea's royal family and personally explain. The letter also especially mentioned Ling Jianshui, whom Hellion Rong, his maternal grandfather, wanted to personally see. So, Hellion Sun Shui asked Ling Han. Ling Han muttered to himself and said, "We must go so that we can win over your family. However, we can't exactly let our guard down, since it can be a trap." "Then what do you plan on doing?" Hellion Sun Shui said. If possible, she obviously didn't want to fall out with her family. Ling Han pondered and said, "Go ask Yi Shuang. If she's willing to be our bodyguard, this trip will be safe. However, without her keeping watch over the imperial city, I'm worried that people will take advantage of her absence, which is rather problematic." Hellion Sun Shui nodded. Now the 5 great ancient sects and the 1,000 Corp sect all had their eyes on Great Ling Empire, although Purple Moon Emperor's court tied up the majority of their forces, but to send a few shattering void-tier elites was still possible. Who in the imperial city would able to rival them? Ling Han thought it over shortly, shook his head and said, "Yi Shuang is not suited to leave. I'll bring Ice Dragon Ground Blast Formation, which can rival shattering void tier 7 stars. On top of Black Tower's protection, even if there's a falling out, there's no need to be afraid. So it's really just the 2 of us going?" Hellion Sun Shui was somewhat worried. Ling Han smiled and said, "My father-in-law wants to see his grandson, so we'll show him. If that's the case, then I'll have to make arrangements, or else if I'm not here, the matters of the empire would be hopelessly chaotic," Hellion Sun Shui said. Ling Han couldn't help but curl his lips and said, "You say it like I haven't done anything." Hellion Sun Shui rolled her eyes and said, "Then tell me, what have you done?" Ling Han looked at her slender and alluring figure, and couldn't help but tease her. "You!" Hellion Sun Shui was first taken aback, and then came to her senses, pinching Ling Han fiercely. This guy actually made a perverted joke. How truly rascally. Yi Shuang couldn't leave. The imperial city was not only the center of the nation, but also Ling family's headquarters, so how could a mishap be allowed? If Yi Shuang didn't keep watch, Ling Han would definitely put his parents in the Black Tower. After all, he was now a target for all. After discussing for a while, Ling Han decided to bring Hellion Sun Shui, Hunyo, and his son to the North Sea, not bringing the others. Hunyo hadn't reached the Shattering Void tier, but she had extremely fast speed, and even a Shattering Void tier elite would have a hard time hurting her. She could go anywhere in the world. Besides, was it possible not to bring her? The little girl was impossible to shake off. They entered the desolate north again, and first went to see the situation with the ancient mineshaft in Fire Country. The Black Chi was more and more terrifying, making Ling Han more worried as to when the buried dead people down there would come into the world. After taking a glance, they went out to sea and set out towards Hellion royal family's ancestral grounds. After martial artists advanced to the flower blossom tier, they broke away from the mortal body, and it didn't matter if they didn't breathe or eat. As long as they could absorb spirit chi, they could maintain their life force. Reaching Ling Han's height, their life force was even more formidable, and even without absorbing spirit chi, they could still hold out for several tens of years through exhausting their own origin power. Thus, they held their breath and were like fish in the great sea. Hellion Sun Shui didn't even need to hold her breath. She possessed true dragon's blood, and it was no different for her whether she was in the water and on land. Actually, her battle prowess even rose in the sea. Ling Han nodded inwardly. In terms of spirit chi density, the sea wasn't superior to the land, but the sea's spirit chi was basically water element. The sea race was also basically water element, so, relatively, the sea race also had an extremely great cultivation advantage. The sea was three-dimensional. Only small fish lived in the shallow areas, but after entering the deep sea, all sorts of large fish appeared one by one. Supermassive species also appeared, especially after entering over 5,000 meters deep. These types of living creatures could easily reach several hundred of meters in size, becoming as large as a mountain, an extremely shocking thing. Even if these living creatures didn't cultivate, their brute force was terrifyingly great, being able to crush a mountain with a light bump. And hearing Hellion Sun Shui's words, this actually wasn't the largest body type, not even 1/100th of it, which shocked Ling Han. Then once the supersized sea monsters matured, would they be able to rival the Shattering Void tier? After 3 days, they were already far from the desolate north. According to Hellion Sun Shui, it was about 7 days' journey to Hellion royal family's ancestral grounds. Against expectations, Ling Han thought Hellion family's ancestral grounds were deep in the sea, but instead it was on a gigantic island. In reality, the majority of the sea race placed their ancestral grounds on islands because there were supersized living beings at the bottom of the sea. They weren't sentient and didn't cultivate, but they were born with formidable physiques. If the ancestral grounds were set at the bottom of the sea, then they'd risk the danger of them being demolished by these living beings. Then why are you bringing me to the bottom of the sea? Ling Han couldn't help but ask. Hellion Sun Shui smiled and said, since we're at sea, I obviously want to properly show you the sea race's sights. Ling Han was speechless. After another 7 days, they finally arrived at Hellion royal family's ancestral grounds, Dome Cloud Island. Stop! Who dares to barge in recklessly into Hellion family's territory? Just when they set foot on the island, they saw 2 guard-like people charge over. Their upper body was human, but their lower body was lobster-shaped, astonishing Ling Han. Seventh princess. When they saw Hellion Sun Shui, they both knelt down halfway in salutation. Hellion Sun Shui avoiding marriage undoubtedly made Hellion and the Xianxia royal family pursue her together, but Hellion royal family never said they abolished Hellion Sun Shui's position as a princess. Her bloodline was extremely rare and noble, and she definitely wouldn't be demoted just like that. If that was the case, how could these 2 lobster guards dare not to be respectful? Hellion Sun Shui waved her hand and said, I want to see my father. Yes, this subordinate will immediately go report it. A lobsterman turned and left. Actually, even if Hellion Sun Shui didn't say so, they would do so. Hellion Sun Shui now carried the status of an escapee, and the Hellion family was constantly searching for her. Ling Han stroked his chin. The saying, the ugly bride isn't afraid to meet her parents-in-law, was true, and now that it was his turn to meet the father-in-law, he really felt somewhat nervous.